I am Maddie. At 17, most people dream about senior prom or taking road trips with friends. But not me. I spend most of my time sitting in a quiet room, staring at an old photo of me and Taylor. I wonder how a human heart can break into so many pieces and still find the strength to beat. Taylor wasn't just my best friend. She was the other half of my soul. From the first time we met when we were 9 years old, Taylor and I were inseparable. People used to call us twins because we went everywhere and did everything together. When we were 12, Taylor's family had to move to a different town. I cried so much and begged my parents to move our house to follow her family. I couldn't imagine life without Taylor. My parents gave in to my wishes and agreed, so we continued our journey together. Taylor was the kind of person everyone loved the moment they met her. She had blue eyes, soft brown hair, and a smile that always made you feel at ease. But what I truly admired was the way she was always kind to everyone. She was always warm and good-hearted, and I cherished every moment we spent together. Taylor spent a lot of time at my house, sometimes even more than at her own. Taylor often stayed the night, and on some nights, she would hold me and cry. I asked her why, but she just shook her head, not wanting to talk. Once, past midnight, Taylor unexpectedly knocked on my door with terror in her eyes, saying she needed to stay over. I never refused. I just held her and tried to make her feel safe. I knew something bad must have been happening. One day, Taylor showed me an Instagram account. The name was Brad Wright. The profile showed a perfect man, a sharp jawline, stunning blue eyes, broad shoulders, and a very confident vibe. Brad messaged her constantly, always starting conversations and complimenting Taylor. What stood out was Brad's patience, waiting for a response from Taylor even though it had been 3 weeks with no luck. Taylor laughed and said it was just for fun, but I could see she was flustered every time he was mentioned. Brad even said he lived in the same town as us, so I told Taylor to consider meeting him. A perfect guy like that was worth talking to, right? But then, Taylor disappeared. I couldn't believe it. She wasn't the type of person to leave without saying a word. Her mother and her stepfather were frantic, searching everywhere. I joined the townspeople to form a search party, looking from small alleys to the woods on the edge of town. Every time someone called out Taylor's name, a spark of hope lit up in me. I hoped she would appear and explain that everything was just a misunderstanding. A week later, volunteers found Taylor in the woods on the outskirts of town. She was gone. I collapsed when I heard the news. The sense of loss felt like it was suffocating my heart. When the details of the crime scene were revealed, I vomited from disgust and pain. My Taylor, that beautiful, kind girl, had been destroyed in the most haunting way possible. Her nose was shattered, and her face was distorted from a brutal beating. Her clothes. The killer had intentionally humiliated her even after she had passed away. Her upper body was torn because of wild animals, and there was a strong smell of bleach mixed with the scent of decay. The police started their investigation. I provided information about Brad Wright, hoping the perfect guy from Instagram would be caught. I hoped that would be the clue to the truth. But when the truth came out, it was even more sickening than death. The Brad Wright account didn't exist. The pictures were fake. The person behind those sweet messages, the one who patiently waited for Taylor for weeks, the one who lured her into the woods to commit that monstrous act, was Taylor's stepfather. I felt a double betrayal, losing my best friend and realizing the killer was someone we trusted. Taylor's stepfather was actually just her mother's boyfriend, as they had only known each other for a few months. He had a scary appearance, but his sincere gestures and words had made me think differently. Taylor had run to me for safety, but I didn't fully understand what she was trying to hide. That sick and depraved stepfather was sentenced to life in prison, but my Taylor will never come back. Pain and anger fill me, but the only thing I can do is tell her story. I want to make sure no one else has to experience the pain Taylor endured. Taylor will forever be the most beautiful part of my youth, and I will always remember her. Her story will not be forgotten. This story is based on the tragic true crime case of a young woman named Justice Marie Garrett, which took place in April 2018. The perpetrator was Robert Bobby Kern. He claimed to be Justice's stepfather, but he was actually just her mother's boyfriend. Their relationship had not been going on for very long at the time. According to her best friend Rochelle, Justice often avoided going home. Instead, she stayed overnight at Rochelle's house as much as possible. Both Justice and Rochelle were deeply intimidated by Kern. His scary appearance and behavior made them feel uneasy every time they saw him. On the day she went missing, the predator claimed he was driving Justice to school. In reality, this was a trap. He had planned the ride so he could carry out a depraved and violent attack on her. This story highlights a serious and ongoing issue in society regarding the hidden dangers young women face. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the people closest to a family can be the most dangerous and difficult criminals to stop. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories. My name is Robert, and I live in a small town in Georgia. This story happened back in 2012. I was 22 at the time, fresh out of community college and working part-time at a tire shop in Mayfield Hollow. I had two best friends, Kyle Morgan and Sean Turner. Kyle was the kind of guy who commanded the room the second he walked in. He was reckless, impulsive, always had some get-rich-quick scheme, and possessed an irresistible charm. Sean, on the other hand, was the calmest person I ever knew. He was the anchor that kept our friendship from drifting away into Kyle's crazy ideas. That February, we decided to spend a weekend fishing on the Apalachicola River. Kyle excitedly bragged that he had borrowed an aluminum fishing boat, but when he showed up with it, the thing was shockingly old and beat up. Kyle was at the helm, constantly cracking jokes about creepy creatures lurking in the dark water and the bodies of drowned people that were never found. Sean's face went pale listening to those stories, but Kyle didn't care. He just kept driving the boat in circles around the brush, looking for the perfect fishing spot. 3 hours passed without a single bite. Kyle started getting cranky. He began driving aggressively, revving the engine and making sharp turns to churn up the water. And then, the nightmare happened. The boat tilted hard. Sean lost his balance and tumbled into the river. At first, I thought it was just a typical fall, but then Sean started screaming that he didn't know how to swim. I quickly turned to Kyle, waiting for him to react. In that split second, Kyle's face froze. It was an expression of total emptiness, a coldness that sent shivers down my spine. Then he acted. He revved the engine and turned the boat back toward Sean, but he went too fast. The side of the boat slammed into Sean's head with a sickening crack, and he sank instantly. We both jumped into the water immediately, diving into the murky depths to find him, but it was hopeless. The river was like a black curtain. We couldn't see a thing. It took 3 days for the dive team to find Sean's body. He had drifted miles downstream. Kyle told the police it was a tragic accident caused by a lapse in judgment while driving the boat. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. During that time, I tried to convince myself that Kyle was just a careless guy, that the coldness I saw on his face was just a figment of my panicked imagination. But when Kyle got out of prison, things took a much darker turn. He contacted me, his voice still full of that high energy. He said he wanted things to go back to the way they were because I was his only friend left. We met up. At first, everything seemed normal. But then Kyle started asking me to go to strange places, remote trails deep in the woods or abandoned hunting cabins miles from anyone. Every time we were out there, he would say things that made my blood run cold. Kyle talked about how easy it would be to make someone disappear in a place like that. If someone screamed in these woods, Not a single soul would hear them, he'd say. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was just a twisted joke. But Kyle's eyes were cold and calculating, like he was measuring my reaction. Another time, he described in graphic detail an idea he had: digging a deep pit in the mountains, filling it with piranhas, and throwing a living person in just to see what happened. He said he had researched them and knew they could strip a human to the bone in minutes. His voice sounded genuinely excited. The breaking point was when Kyle proposed a business idea for the deep web. He talked about filming mukbang videos, but instead of normal food, the person would be eating human flesh. He was dead serious, saying people would pay millions of dollars to watch stuff like that. Right then, I knew I had to get away from him. This wasn't the friend I used to know. I blocked his number, moved to a different city, and tried to forget everything. Years passed, and I built a new life for myself, but the past wouldn't let go. One day, I got a call from an unknown number in Orlando. It was Kyle. His voice was weak and raspy. He told me he had terminal cancer. "The doctors say I only have a few weeks. I want to see you one last time." I agreed. When I walked into that hospital room, I barely recognized him. He was skin and bones, with wires and tubes snaking out of his arms, connecting him to the machines keeping him alive. When he saw me, he smiled. I felt a lump in my throat. He whispered about the good old days we used to have. Then he confessed to killing Sean. He explained that he had lost a huge fish because Sean was fumbling with the anchor, and it made him fly into a silent rage. At first, he just wanted to scare Sean, but when Sean fell into the water, Kyle saw an opportunity. He knew exactly what he was doing when he steered the boat into our drowning friend. I sat there in shock, unable to do anything but listen to the horrific truth. Then Kyle chuckled. Sean wasn't the only one. There were 5 in total. It turned out all those weird stories he told me were true. They weren't ideas. They were things he had actually done. I left the hospital in a daze. During the entire meeting, I hadn't been able to utter a single word. Kyle died a week later. I didn't go to the funeral, and I didn't send flowers. Many years have gone by, but every night I still wonder, how much of a dying man's confession is the truth? Was Kyle Morgan a real serial killer, or just a psychopath who wanted to plant one last seed of terror in the heart of the only friend he had left? I don't know, and honestly, I don't think I want to.
My name is Adam, 30 years old, living in a quiet small town in Ohio. I worked as an amateur private investigator, mostly taking on small jobs from online forums. I needed the money, and that was the only reason I agreed to a job from a man named Dale last October. He wanted me to find his younger sister Annie, who had gone missing 12 years earlier. I met Dale at a roadside cafe. The moment I saw him, he gave off an uncomfortable, physically unclean impression. He had thick, messy black hair that looked like it hadn't been washed in days, a wrinkled old sweatshirt with a brown stain on the chest, and a heavy body odor so strong that I had to take shallow breaths just to stay focused. Dale told me he was a final year medical student and was taking care of sick family members. But the trembling in his voice, the dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep, and the foul smell on his breath made me doubt every word. I saw someone who was desperate, obsessed, and completely lost. He handed me an old, blurry photograph of a little girl, about 2 or 3 years old. She was staring straight into the camera with big, innocent eyes, and he said that was Annie. Everything felt suspicious, a huge disconnect between the story he was telling and the man standing in front of me. But I looked at the thick envelope he gave me, a deposit worth 2 months' rent, and told myself, this is just another hopeless missing person case. It would lead nowhere, but I'd still get paid. I took the deposit and began the job. 10 days later, my skepticism turned into horror. I moved to the neighborhood where Dale lived, hoping to find more clues about his family's past. There, I met Mr. Walker, a recently moved-in neighbor. He was a polite, middle-aged man who seemed very familiar with the area. While talking, I mentioned Dale. Walker froze, frowned, then slowly told me things that stunned me. Dale's parents died 12 years ago in a car accident. Dale was not a medical student. He was studying welding at a technical school. And most importantly, he's severely traumatized. And I don't recall him ever having a younger sister. Walker told the story calmly and confidently, completely shaking the foundation of everything Dale had told me. I decided to investigate Dale more closely. I checked his technical school. A classmate told me that Dale often brought 3 large dolls to class. He treated them like children, and one of them he called Annie. I was shocked, but arrived at a comforting conclusion. Dale had suffered severe psychological trauma after his parents' death and some kind of personal loss, which led him to develop delusions and create a doll family to cope. I thought, at least he isn't a criminal. I'm just taking money from a broken man. That eased my nerves somewhat. During a progress call with Dale, I casually dropped some small talk to justify my lack of progress. "Looks like someone new just moved into your area," I said. "I saw some moving trucks not long ago. Probably a young family with a little girl or something." It was a harmless throwaway comment, but for someone like Dale, that sentence lit a dangerous spark. I didn't know I had just unknowingly handed him a target right next door. That night, around 11 p.m., I heard a loud scream coming from Walker's house. I ran outside and saw police pinning Dale to the ground. He had been caught trying to pull Walker's daughter, a little girl named Mandy, into his old car. Dale, being restrained by 2 officers, was still screaming in desperation, calling the girl Annie. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine. I realized my careless remark had triggered Dale's kidnapping attempt. After Dale was arrested, I knew I had to do something to redeem myself. I sought out Shirley, the neighborhood association president, who held all the secrets of this small town. Ms. Shirley confirmed that Dale's family did have a 2 to 3-year-old girl who was kidnapped 12 years ago, and Dale's parents died from the shock. So, Dale really did have a sister. But then, she said something that hit me like a lightning strike. The Walkers moved away right after the kidnapping, and only recently returned. Their real daughter died shortly before Annie went missing. They left to cope with the grief. The girl they're raising now, Mandy, she's not their biological child. My entire world spun. Walker's calm insistence that Dale had no sister was a lie. He had lied to me. What else had he lied about? I rushed home, retrieving Dale's old photo of Annie. I zoomed in on it on my computer, staring at the girl's face. I noticed she had 3 tiny moles, arranged in a triangle on her neck. My heart pounded. I drove straight to Mandy's school. I stood at the gate, waiting. When little Mandy walked out, I watched closely. Exactly those 3 moles, arranged in a triangle. I stood frozen in shock. So Mandy was Annie. The Walker family were the kidnappers. I started piecing everything together. The Walkers' real daughter died 12 years ago. The Walkers kidnapped Annie, renamed her Mandy, and raised her as their own daughter to fill the void of their loss. I found the final answer in the secluded outskirts where the old town cemetery lay. In a hidden corner, I found a small, well-cared-for grave with an old stone angel statue. The grave belonged to Mandy Walker, died 12 years ago. That was undeniable proof of their motive. Why did Walker return? Most likely, after 12 years they thought things had settled down, and they returned so Annie, now Mandy, could live near the fake grave they created. I immediately handed over all the information and evidence to the police. Dale, a damaged young man labeled by the community, as a delusional doll fanatic, was arrested for kidnapping. But in reality, he was trying to rescue his true little sister. The kidnapping case from 12 years ago and the Walker's horrifying cover-up were exposed, all because a brother never gave up on his sister. I once thought a mother's greatest pain was losing a child. But for me, that pain was the beginning of the most terrifying and haunting period of my life. I'm Beth. I live in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, with my husband Mike and our 17-year-old son, Kevin. Our lives were peaceful until that July night. Around 2 a.m., a terrifying explosion shook the entire house. The pungent smell of smoke filled the bedroom from under the door. I quickly pushed Mike awake. "The house is on fire!" I screamed. Mike leapt out of bed, opening the bedroom door. Flames were already high, the wooden staircase ablaze. Thick black smoke billowed, making it hard to breathe. We crawled on the floor, trying to escape through the window. "Kevin! Where's Kevin?" my husband shouted. Kevin's bedroom was at the end of the hallway. I saw Mike rush towards it despite the spreading flames. I wanted to follow, but the smoke was too thick. I couldn't breathe anymore. I had to climb out the window, falling into the bushes below. I stood on the lawn in front of the house, watching the flames devour our home. The wail of fire trucks echoed in the distance. Mike was brought out by rescuers from the second-story window, his hands and face covered in burn marks. But he was alone. Our son was nowhere to be seen. "Kevin! Where's Kevin?" I screamed. Mike shook his head, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead. I couldn't find him. The world seemed to collapse around me. I couldn't accept the reality at that moment. Kevin was still in there, in that fire, waiting for me to save him. I had to go in there. I had to find my son. "Kevin!" I screamed and lunged towards the burning house. Mike and a firefighter had to hold me back. "Let me go. My son is in there." I struggled and wailed his name. Mike and I embraced, crying loudly. A few hours later, when daylight broke and the fire had completely subsided, only a pile of charred ashes remained. The rescue team searched through the ashes, but found no sign of Kevin's body. I huddled in the back seat of the ambulance, my mind in a strange, blank state. We searched very thoroughly, but the fire was too large, coupled with the high temperature, especially in Kevin's bedroom area. At such temperatures, even bones can be incinerated into ash. The words from a rescue worker made me completely break down. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Coleman. We believe Kevin perished in the fire. Mrs. Coleman, I know this is very hard to accept." No, no, no. My son is not dead. You have to keep looking," I screamed. Mike hugged me, but this pain was inconsolable. The first few weeks were terrible. Mike was hospitalized for his burns. I stayed with my sister, but every day I drove back to the house. I couldn't accept that Kevin was dead. I dug through the ashes, searching for any remnant of my son. I lost 10 pounds in just 3 weeks and had to constantly take sleeping pills and tranquilizers. After a month, when I could finally accept the truth, we started clearing the debris to rebuild the house. I continued searching. In the rubble of Kevin's room, I found his half-burnt desk. The bottom drawer was still partially intact. Inside, I found a notebook that had been slightly burned, but the remaining pages were still legible. My heart pounded as I realized it was Kevin's diary. I clutched the notebook to my chest, the pain making me burst into tears. After a moment, I took a deep breath and opened the diary. February 15th. Today I attended my first meeting. I understand that only we truly grasp the truth and can cleanse the world. I reread that sentence 3 times. My hands trembled as I turned to another page. February 28th. Jake taught me how to make a bomb. He said we had to act soon. The church is the first target. We will cleanse the world of hypocrites. I couldn't breathe. That's where we used to take Kevin for Mass every Sunday. He used to sing in the choir. I continued reading. March 10th. The bomb is ready. I hid it in my bedroom. Tomorrow we will place it at the church. I threw the notebook to the ground and crawled away. I understood what had happened. Could it be? The bomb Kevin made had unexpectedly exploded in his bedroom. He died instantly, and his body was... The explosion caused the fire that consumed the entire house. I wailed from the deepest part of my pain. My son was a terrorist, a member of some extremist cult. I had failed as a mother. I didn't know what my own child was thinking. "What did you find, Beth?" Mike's question startled me. I quickly hid the diary in my bag. Just a few of Kevin's belongings left. I'm picking them up. That night, I burned the diary. I couldn't tell Mike everything. He had suffered enough. We still had to continue our lives in this small town. I would bury and end everything here. Watching the pages burn to ash, carrying Kevin's horrific secret. But I knew this wasn't the end. I had a responsibility to do something to atone for my son. I started volunteering at a youth counseling center. I wanted to help lost children who could easily be drawn into cults like Kevin. Every night I still dream of Kevin, then wake up haunted by how I failed as a mother. Perhaps that's the punishment I have to endure, not just to lose my child, but to live with the truth that my child could have become a murderer. And perhaps that's also the only way for me to find meaning in life again. I will try my best so that no other child will go down the path Kevin took. Some sounds just bring back the past, no matter how hard you try to forget. The sound I fear and am most haunted by is the chirping of cicadas. It reminds me of a horrifying summer 13 years ago. I was 12 then, living with my parents in a small town in the San Joaquin Valley, California. Summer days there were hot and quiet, with only the incessant chirping of cicadas echoing from the old eucalyptus trees. Next to our house lived Mrs. Morris. She was around 60, with thinning gray hair. She lived alone in a small house at the end of the street. At first, I didn't pay much attention to Mrs. Morris. She was just a quiet old neighbor I occasionally saw watering her garden in the early morning. But gradually I started noticing strange things. One night, I woke up thirsty. Through my bedroom window, I accidentally saw Mrs. Morris standing in the middle of her yard in the shadow of the moonlight. She was whispering something. No one else was around. A few other nights, the scene repeated. Mrs. Morris wandered in her yard with empty eyes, muttering sentences I couldn't clearly hear. Sometimes she would stop, her head tilted to one side, as if listening for someone to reply. Then she would nod and continue whispering. I was scared but didn't tell my parents, choosing instead to close my window tightly and draw the curtains forever. As time passed, I gradually forgot about her strange behavior. Mrs. Morris never seemed to do anything harmful anyway. Aside from the strange neighbor, life in my family's neighborhood was very peaceful. Our house was near a paved road that gently sloped downhill. Every afternoon, I would take my rollerblades to that slope to skate. It was my favorite part of the day. At the bottom of the slope, there was a large moss-green truck parked on the side of the road. The truck was old, its paint peeling in many places, and its bed covered with a dark blue tarp. I usually rollerbladed down to it and then back up, repeating until I was tired. That fateful afternoon, I decided to try rollerblading down the slope as fast as I could. My mom had warned me many times about going too fast, but I never listened. The asphalt was scorching hot under my rollerblade wheels. The warm wind blew through my hair as I sped down the hill. I felt free and exhilarated, until I saw a small dog run across the road right in front of me. I braked hard, losing my balance. Realizing I was about to fall, I could only squeeze my eyes shut and scream. I slowly opened my eyes, sitting up slowly in a daze. Then I was startled to realize I was underneath the truck. The smell of oil and rubber mixed together made the air incredibly suffocating. I gasped for breath, just needing to crawl out. But as I looked around, I was drawn to some white strands gently fluttering in the breeze. Long, soft strands, clinging to something stuck between the two rear wheels. Out of curiosity, I crawled closer. At first, I only saw a pale, round shape, thinking it was a ball or some toy. But when I looked closer, a pair of eyes staring straight back at me. Below them was a nose, one side completely mangled, a wide-open mouth with the tongue lolling out. My entire body froze, my mouth dry, scared but unable to tear my eyes away from that face. Then I realized, Mrs. Morris. Just then, as if hearing her name, Mrs. Morris's head tilted to one side. The creaking sound from her neck bones sent a shiver down my spine. Her body was wedged between the axle and the road, her floral dress torn, her limbs bent at unnatural angles. Blood had dried to a dark brown on the pavement. I screamed and crawled out from under the truck as fast as I could. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably when I got home, my heart pounding as if it would explode. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled as I burst into the house. "Mrs. Morris ... My mom looked worried, seeing my panicked state. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "Under the truck. Mrs. Morris is under the truck," I cried, trying to explain. My dad ran outside. A few minutes later, he returned with a pale face and immediately called the police. The police arrived, cordoned off the scene, and removed Mrs. Morris's body. They asked for basic information and instructed everyone not to approach the area. A few days later, the investigation results were released in the local newspaper. According to the report, Mrs. Morris had been suffering from severe insomnia and depression for many years. Inside her home, police found many empty pill bottles and disorganized notes. The autopsy results showed an unusually high concentration of sleeping pills in her blood. The police concluded, on the night of the accident, Mrs. Morris was sleepless and wandering around in a dazed state. A neighbor's camera recorded Mrs. Morris wandering the night the accident happened. Police analyzed the camera footage and concluded that Mrs. Morris was very likely in a dazed state and lay down under Mr. James's car without realizing it. As for Mr. James, he testified that on the night of the accident, he received a complaint from a resident on the street about his car blocking part of a pathway. He went back to his car to move it forward a bit. While driving, he felt a slight bump, but he dismissed it, thinking it was just a rock or a branch. He was not prosecuted, as this was deemed a tragic accident with no signs of negligence. I never rollerbladed on that slope again. My family moved when I was 17. Mrs. Morris's house is still there, abandoned with boarded-up windows. And on hot summer nights, when I hear the cicadas chirping, I still remember the pungent smell of engine oil from under the truck. Most horrifyingly, every narrow gap makes me see Mrs. Morris's distorted face and long gray hair. Looking back now, I understand that those times I saw Mrs. Morris wandering at night and whispering to herself were signs of the psychological illness she was enduring. Perhaps she struggled with insomnia and loneliness for years, until it led to that tragic end. I used to believe the small town where I was born was the safest place on earth. But then, one autumn night last year, a terrifying secret was uncovered that shook the entire town. What haunts me the most is who was behind it. I work as an accountant for a small oil and gas company in Marfa, Texas. It's a small town near the Mexican border. Everyone knows everyone. One of my mechanic friends is Roy. His garage is right in the center of town. I always thought Roy was a kind and gentle man. Not just me, but the whole town loved Roy. Until last autumn, when an incident changed the way I saw everyone around me. I had just finished my shift and was on my way home. I stopped to get gas. Across the street, I saw a chaotic scene. The area was cordoned off. There were many police cars and sirens wailed loudly. Then, I saw a woman wrapped in a blanket. A police officer was leading her away. The woman looked like she had just returned from hell. Her pants were torn, her hair was disheveled, and her face was gaunt. I froze, realizing that the place she had just come from was Roy's auto shop. In the very next second, seeing Roy handcuffed in the back of a police car, head bowed, shocked me. That evening, the whole town was buzzing about what happened with Roy, and I was no exception. The town's resident chat group exploded. Messages kept popping up. Everyone was talking excitedly. From the snippets of information in the messages, I learned that the woman's name was Hannah, a cashier at the local supermarket. She had only moved to town a short while ago and had been missing for 2 weeks. Everyone thought she had gone to visit family in Dallas. But what had really happened, we didn't know. It was all just speculation. 2 days later, the local newspaper published an article with a headline that sent shivers down my spine. Local mechanic accused of abduction and torture. It was just as everyone had suspected. The girl was Hannah. She had been held captive by Roy in a secret room behind his garage for 2 weeks. Hannah recounted that Roy had lured her into the garage, claiming her car had an urgent problem that needed to be checked. What Hannah described stunned me. The room where Hannah was held was completely soundproofed, with surveillance cameras in every corner. On a shelf were videotapes labeled with different dates and the names of dozens of women. Among them was Jessica, a young and beautiful girl who was well known in town. Jessica had disappeared 3 years ago. Everyone thought Jessica had left town to pursue her acting dream in Austin. But now we knew the truth. The police also found a notebook belonging to Roy that detailed everyone's habits. He knew their exact work hours, when they came home, when they went shopping. Roy even recorded private conversations he had overheard. But that was only half of the horror, because those were the victims Roy had successfully executed his plan on. In the days after Roy's arrest, many other women came forward, stating they had been followed or approached by Roy. But as a beloved and trusted figure in the community, it was hard for people to unmask him. I started to recall the signs I had overlooked. Roy always asked too many questions about everyone's private lives. He could recount detailed schedules for anyone in town. At the time, I thought Roy was just a neighbor who cared, but now I understand it was a sign of systematic stalking. I suddenly remembered a detail from about a month ago. I was coming home late after a date with Sam and saw the silhouette of a man standing near her house. When I looked closer, the person had vanished. Now I'm sure it was Roy. It's terrifying that Roy had lived among us for years, receiving absolute respect and trust. The trial took place 6 months later, with many town residents and Roy's would-be victims present. He sat silently throughout the proceedings, showing no emotion. When his lawyer asked why he did those things, Roy simply said, "I wanted to understand them." He offered no complex defenses or explanations. Roy's statement silenced the entire courtroom. He didn't see women as human beings, but merely as subjects to study and control. Hannah left town right after the trial. Roy was sentenced to 25 years. His garage was demolished a month later. Now, it's just a gravel lot with weeds growing on it. The town of Marfa is not the same anymore. People have become more vigilant. Casual conversations on the streets have become less frequent. Sometimes the most dangerous person isn't a stranger in the dark, but the neighbor with a friendly smile. I learned that intuition never lies. If something makes you feel uncomfortable about a person, no matter how small, listen to it. Because sometimes the smallest details are signs of something far more dangerous. My name is Alex. I grew up in the quiet town of Ardmore, Pennsylvania. There wasn't much to do there, so finding something fun was always a challenge. When I was in high school, my 3 friends and I often snuck into old abandoned buildings to explore. It was something we loved to do. It wasn't until many years later that I realized that urban exploration is actually a pretty common thing. There was an abandoned church in town that we had visited a few times before. It was creepy, but it was our go-to spot whenever we were looking for a thrill late at night. One chilly fall evening, the air was cool and crisp. We decided to visit the church and have a few drinks inside. The church was behind an 8-foot-high chain-link fence, so we had to climb over it. All of the doors were boarded up, so we always had to enter through a side window. When we got inside, the first thing we noticed was that the floor was strange. The first floor was just dirt. like someone had removed all of the floorboards a long time ago. It left a deep hole in the middle with concrete steps leading down to the basement. We always hung out in that basement. The basement had 3 rooms, but only one had a door. The other 2 were just door frames. The first room we entered was the biggest. There wasn't much in it besides a few old pieces of furniture, broken chairs, and a tattered couch. I remember having to remind my friend Max to be quiet at least a dozen times because he was drunk and getting loud. Still, being in a group was an advantage, and I felt safer knowing there were a few of us together. We drank and laughed as usual. We may have even had music playing, but I don't remember clearly. Then suddenly a door slammed shut. The sound was so loud it startled me. We froze, looking at each other nervously. At first, I thought maybe one of us had accidentally closed the door, or that it was just the wind, but nobody was close to it. Immediately, my friends Luna and Allie panicked and took off. They flew up the stairs, leaving me and Max behind. I didn't want to leave right away. My heart was pounding, I admit, but I didn't want to let the sound scare me. Max looked at my friends leaving, then looked at me, and gave me a silly smile. I knew he was just drunk, not brave. After a few minutes of standing in silence, we decided to investigate. I tiptoed to the door that had just slammed shut and opened it. Behind it was a small room. Max walked past me and went into the room with a carefree look on his face, as if nothing was strange. He touched a dusty wooden table and shook his head, then even sat down in a chair next to it, relaxing as if he were in a familiar place. I walked in and looked around. Besides the table and chairs, there was a wooden shelf. On it was a mirror with some red stains on the surface. At first, I thought it was old paint or something similar, but when I got closer, I noticed something horrifying. They weren't completely dry. The stains were still sticky. I felt the hair on my arms stand up and started to regret not leaving sooner. Clearly, someone or something had been in this room recently. Then, I saw an old photo on the shelf. It was a black and white picture of a woman in a wedding dress. I backed away, and just as I turned, I heard another sound. This time it wasn't a door. It was coming from one of the other rooms, the big room in the basement that we had just left. At this point, I decided it was time to leave. I quickly grabbed our stuff and pulled Max out of there as fast as I could. He was just a body moving, but his mind was asleep, and it took a lot of effort to pull him. I took a deep breath and slapped Max hard to get him to wake up. Then I pushed him to go first. Luna and Allie were still outside waiting for us. When I climbed over the fence and put my feet on the sidewalk, none of us said a word. Before we left, I looked back, and I swear I saw a person's silhouette standing in the open window frame. I still pray that, by some small chance, my mind was playing tricks on me, but I'll never know for sure. I never went back to that church again. Many years later, I went back and found that the church had been completely demolished. I still can't find an explanation for what happened that night. I'm glad my friends were there to witness it with me. If I had been alone, I would have doubted the whole thing. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, where everyone knows your name and your family's business. Even now, at 28, the memory of what happened when I was 14 still haunts me. Back then, Halloween was the day I looked forward to most all year. It wasn't just about the candy anymore. It was about the fun of coming up with mischievous ways to mess with Mr. Harlan. Mr. Harlan lived in an old brick house right on the edge of the road, just before the street disappeared into the vast cornfields. He was in his late 70s, always wore high-waisted dress pants, and hated kids, especially me and my older brother Kyle. Every Halloween, teasing him became a favorite job for us. I remember most of the things we did. In 5th grade, we toilet papered his whole front porch. In 6th grade, we put a fake snake in his mailbox. By 8th grade, we were putting severed rubber arms in his yard, setting off stink bombs under his window, and Kyle even rigged a speaker to play random screams from the bushes. Every time he was messed with, Mr. Harlan would rush out with his flashlight and scream threats. But nothing ever happened. He never called our parents or the police, just mumbled something about getting us back. We thought he was just talk. That year, Halloween fell on a Saturday and it was warm, which was perfect for staying out late. Kyle and I had been planning our grand finale of pranks for weeks, but as we walked past Mr. Harlan's house at sunset, we noticed something weird. Paper skeletons taped to the windows, an inflatable pumpkin in the yard, twinkling lights on the porch. It looked cheap, like someone had just bought a Halloween kit and thrown everything up at once. But the notable thing was, Mr. Harlan never decorated. Kyle nudged me and said, "He's trying to outdo us. We can't let him win." We waited until late at night, when most trick-or-treaters were gone and the street was quiet. Kyle brought a bag full of tools, nothing dangerous, just our usual stuff: smoke bombs, a motion-activated sound box, and a plastic doll painted with fake blood. We sneaked through Mr. Harlan's backyard, keeping low behind the row of bushes along his fence. Everything was dark, except for the faint orange glow from the porch. There was no noise, not even the static radio he usually kept on. I whispered, "This feels wrong." Kyle just grinned, tossed me the sound box and said, "That's the point, let's mess it up." We split up like always. Kyle went around to the shed near the back fence, while I stayed closer to the house. I was trying to find a good place to hide the sound box when I noticed something strange. The pumpkin on the porch was slowly deflating, like someone had stabbed it. But no one was around. I figured it had a tear. I crouched low behind a bush, waiting for Kyle's flashlight to flash. That's when I heard the shed door open, followed by a loud clank, like something heavy had slammed shut. Then everything went silent again. I waited for a few minutes. I whispered Kyle's name, but there was no answer. I stood up and crept toward the shed. The padlock on the door was secured shut. I tapped lightly on the door and called Kyle's name. No reply. I knocked harder. Still silence. Then I noticed a small camera mounted high in the corner of the shed, flashing red. Right below it, a piece of cardboard read, "Tricked." It hit me then that this was the prank on us. Harlan had turned the tables. I backed away, looking around the yard, expecting him to leap out of the shadows. But no one was there, just a tense silence. I pulled on the shed lock. It wouldn't budge. I tried to smash it with a rock, but it only made a useless clanking sound. From inside, I thought I heard a faint noise, like Kyle was muffled or trying to move. Panic started to spread through my body. I ran back out to the street. I stood frozen under the streetlight. I had two choices: go get help, which meant waking up my parents or the cops and having to admit we had been harassing Harlan, or go back and save Kyle before dawn. I stood there looking at the dark house, the creepy feeling sinking in as I realized we were in too deep, way past what we had ever imagined. I decided I couldn't leave Kyle. I ran back, heart pounding. I used the screwdriver to pry the hinge bolts from the outside. It took forever, but I finally got it open. Kyle was sitting on the floor, pale, with his knees pulled up to his chest. Inside the shed, dozens of photos were taped all over the walls. Astonishingly, they were all pictures of my brother and me over the years. Us in our costumes, walking past his house, even some taken secretly through our bedroom windows. Harlan hadn't hurt Kyle. He had just locked him in, surrounded by the photos. That was Harlan's message. I've been watching, letting everything build up, and this is your punishment. We didn't say anything. We just ran. Since that night, we never set foot near Harlan's house again. He didn't call the police, nor did he ever mention it again. I never forgot that evening. We ran home like crazy, Kyle gasping for breath, and me shaking and speechless. That night, we lay still in our room, unable to sleep, and for the first time, I saw my brother cry. Kyle whispered, "We went too far, didn't we?" I nodded, the guilt feeling like a rock in my chest. I realized all the mischief we had done wasn't harmless kid stuff anymore. We had been hurting and messing with a lonely old man's life for years, just to satisfy our own thrill. Kyle and I decided to stop and apologize. We wrote a letter, leaving it on Mr. Harlan's doorstep. We're sorry for everything. We won't do it again." Mr. Harlan didn't reply, but from then on, every Halloween he decorated his house as usual, and we just quietly walked past. Now, at 28, every time I recall it, I still feel scared. The fear isn't from Mr. Harlan, but because of my own carelessness and impulsiveness back then. I understood that seemingly harmless pranks can leave real wounds on others, and Mr. Harlan's silent retaliation was the deepest lesson I ever got. Consequences always come sooner or later, and empathy is always harder than impulse. Now I tell this story so we can understand that some pranks aren't jokes, and sometimes, just by putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, we can save them and ourselves a lot of pain. My great-grandmother used to tell me a strange story about something she experienced when she was young. At the time, she was married with 4 children. Her family lived in the small town of Quartzsite, Arizona. One afternoon, she was cleaning the farm. Her sister, Eliza, went out to get water from the creek. Their 2 families lived together in the sparsely populated and dangerous American West. Suddenly, the family dogs started to bark fiercely outside. Normally, they were very gentle and rarely barked for no reason. She went to the porch to see what was happening. She saw them barking at a large sand dune in front of the house. Then she saw a huge creature. It had 4 legs and red fur. Its back was twisted. It appeared on top of the dune and came down toward her house. On the back of the creature was a man. But he didn't look normal. His face was horrible and gaunt. His mouth was stretched into a wide smile. And he had no eyes. As a very religious person, she immediately thought it was the devil. He was riding a red creature to come and take her and her family. She ran into the house. She blocked the door with a kitchen table. She gathered her 4 children and prayed. While she was praying, she heard a sharp, terrified scream from outside. She realized it was Eliza's voice. Even though she was terrified and worried about her sister, she didn't dare to go outside. She had to protect her children. A few hours later, the husbands came back from herding sheep. She cried as she told them about the devil and Eliza's disappearance. The 2 men immediately grabbed their guns and oil lamps and went to look for her. They found Eliza near the creek. She was lying face down on the ground. Blood was everywhere. Eliza's body looked like it had been trampled to death. There were many large hoof prints around. My great-grandfather rode his horse into town to tell the sheriff. When the investigator arrived at the scene, he confirmed that Eliza had been trampled to death. The hoof prints left on the ground were too big to be from any horse. My great-grandmother told them the story about seeing the devil and the red-furred creature, but the investigators didn't believe the part about the devil. In the end, Eliza's cause of death was recorded as unknown. From then on, the story of the devil spread throughout the Arizona frontier. People named it the Red Demon. At first, most people didn't believe it was true. They thought it was just a rumor or an exaggeration. However, over time, reports of seeing the Red Demon became more frequent and stranger. She heard many campers say that the red ghost had trampled on their tents. One cowboy claimed to have caught it with his lasso around its neck. But the red ghost ran so hard that it dragged him and forced him to let go. After Eliza's death, she looked out the window one day and saw the Red Demon standing in her turnip garden. My great-grandfather decided he would shoot it dead if he had the chance. After many days of waiting, they saw the red ghost once again. My great-grandfather immediately grabbed his rifle and fired shot after shot at the red ghost until it fell. When they ran out to check, they realized that all the stories about this creature were wrong. The creature was not a monster. It was a camel. It had red fur, a long neck, and a hump on its back. The rider was not the devil. It was the decomposing corpse of a man. The flesh and eyes had rotted off his face. This made him look like he had no eyes and had a wide smile. They didn't know who the man was. They also didn't know how he died. The strange thing was that even though he was dead, his body was still sitting upright on the camel's back. He never fell off. This is what created the scary image of a devil. It wasn't until many years later that people started to understand the truth. The U.S. Army had brought camels to the west from the Mediterranean region to transport goods across the desert. But the U.S. Army was not familiar with how to care for and manage them. The outbreak of the Civil War also caused the project to be abandoned. The camels were either released or sold. Some still existed in the wild in the American Southwest desert. For the people of Arizona at the time, who had never seen these animals outside of books, it was not surprising that they mistook a camel for a monster. My great-grandmother said that from that day on, she no longer believed that all scary things came from hell. Sometimes, it's people and forgetfulness that create the most terrifying ghosts. She lived the rest of her life with regret for not running out when she heard her sister scream. But deep down, she still believed she had done the right thing to protect her children. And every time she retold the story, she would look far away and say softly, "There are some things that look like a devil, but are really just the consequence of a quiet, lonely death in the desert." One August afternoon last year, all it took was a faint knocking sound from an abandoned house to shatter all my beliefs. The perpetrator of the most brutal crime was the person I trusted the most. I'm Elton, the police chief of Sedona, Arizona. For over 15 years of serving here, I've always been proud of this small community. Everyone knows and trusts each other, and the most serious crimes are just land disputes or assaults from drunken fights. That afternoon, I received a call from a family who had just moved into the neighborhood. The woman's voice was filled with anxiety, saying there were strange noises coming from the abandoned house behind their home. The sound was like someone knocking on a wall. I drove my patrol car there. The abandoned house had been there for a long time. The former owner had died many years ago. With no heirs, it was just left to rot. I parked my car and walked into the yard. The weeds were knee-high, and the air was heavy with the smell of mold. I listened, but there was no sound. Maybe the family was mistaken. But as I was about to leave, a faint knocking sound echoed from below. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and some lock-picking tools from the car. I walked inside and felt the wooden floor creak beneath my feet. Searching the first floor, I discovered a secret door under the stairs, locked with a padlock the size of my fist. The strange thing was that the lock was brand new. I used bolt cutters to break the lock. The door opened, revealing a steep wooden staircase leading into the darkness. A strong, foul odor hit me, and I had to cover my nose. "Is anyone here?" My voice echoed down and disappeared into the silence. But then I heard a noise. I slowly walked down. A small room with a low ceiling and no windows gradually appeared. I was shocked to see 3 figures huddled in the corner. A woman and 2 children. All 3 were thin, like skeletons wrapped in skin. The woman looked at me with a look of disbelief. Then she crawled to my feet, grabbed my pants, and sobbed, "Please, please save us." I quickly sat down to comfort the woman. The 2 children, a boy and a girl, just looked at me with scared eyes. I immediately called for an ambulance. While waiting, I shined my flashlight around the room. The walls were covered with etchings. They had carved a line for each day that passed. There were also scrawled messages, pleas for help, and cries for rescue. A bucket in the corner served as a toilet. There were some old, rotting mattresses on the floor, a few cans of food and bottles of water. The medical team arrived and quickly took the woman and the 2 children away. I stayed at the scene with the investigation team. We found a notebook under a mattress. The yellowed pages documented the horror the victims had endured. The first page read, "My name is Leah Porter. Today is the first day I've been held here. If anyone finds this diary..." My mind immediately started racing when I read that line. Leah Porter was a girl who went missing 9 years ago when she was just 16. I had been part of that investigation. The case had been unsolved until today. I continued to read the following pages. She wrote about every day of her captivity, how she was kidnapped on her way home from school. She was locked in here and endured all kinds of physical and mental torture. The 2 children were the kidnappers. She tried to protect them, teaching them to read and write with charcoal on the walls. It was heartbreaking, and I admired Leah's resilience. While examining the scene, a sudden engine noise and a loud screech of tires drew everyone's attention. I looked and immediately recognized the car as belonging to Craig, my best friend. Craig got out of the car, his face as pale as if he had just seen a ghost. I was surprised and asked him what he was doing here, but Craig's eyes were fixed on the ambulance where Leah was being cared for. He stood there like a stone statue for a few seconds. I saw his hands trembling, and he swallowed hard. Then he suddenly turned and ran. I had a bad feeling and ran after him, calling his name. Craig heard me calling and ran faster. I lunged and tackled Craig right in front of his car. "Why are you here, Craig?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with the eyes of a person caught red-handed. When I tackled Craig, a key fell out of his pocket. I handed it to an officer, and the key could open the lock I had just broken. In that moment, my world came crashing down. This abandoned house was only 2 blocks away from Craig's house. The key to the cellar was too new for the age of the house, and most importantly, Craig was the only person I had ever told about Leah Porter's disappearance 9 years ago. He once asked me why the police couldn't find anything. Now I knew the reason. Craig knew because he was the one who hid her. I wanted to punch my best friend, whom I had trusted for 20 years, but I just stood there trembling, watching Craig get handcuffed. I realized how wrong I had been. I had trusted Craig, invited him to my house often, and let him be close to my daughter. I considered Craig my brother, while he was torturing a high school girl and 2 children just a few miles away. In the interrogation room, Craig admitted everything. He confessed to stalking Leah for months before kidnapping her, using the abandoned house as a place of confinement. DNA evidence confirmed he was the father of the 2 children. Leah's diaries, secretly taken photos, and personal belongings found in Craig's house solidified his guilt. With undeniable evidence, Craig was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and rape. Sitting there, reading his statement, I felt suffocated. It took me a long time to sign the arrest warrant for my best friend. I sat in my office for a long time, feeling empty. I still couldn't believe what was happening. Craig is now awaiting trial. Leah and her 2 children are receiving medical and psychological care, slowly learning how to live again. As for me, I'm still the police chief of Sedona, but every night, as I patrol the quiet streets I once believed I knew so well, I wonder how many other secrets are hiding behind closed doors.
My name is Gray. This happened 6 years ago when my girlfriend and I were both 19. One evening, she texted me asking for a big favor. Her parents were out for the night, and she was buried under a mountain of homework. She asked if I could take her 10-year-old brother, Dean, to the local baseball field for his night game and bring him home afterward. Dean and I got along great, so I said yes right away. I picked him up a little early so we could make it before the game started at 7. The baseball field was in a very isolated spot. You had to park your car in an open dirt lot and then walk for about 5 minutes down a trail through a thick forest to reach the field. During the day, the path was fine, but at night, it was a completely different story. The game lasted much longer than expected because it went into extra innings. By the time it ended, the sky was pitch black. Most families had already headed home, and only a few people were left. Dean had to stay behind for a few minutes to talk to his coach about next week's practice schedule, so we were the very last ones to leave the field. Suddenly, the stadium lights shut off on an automatic timer. Everything around us was swallowed by thick, heavy darkness. We started walking onto the forest trail. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. Dean walked right next to me, but he was unusually quiet. He was usually a very talkative kid, but right now, he didn't say a single word. About halfway down the path, Dean suddenly stopped. He squeezed my arm hard and pointed ahead. "Gray, do you see that?" he whispered. I squinted my eyes to see. Even though it was dark, I could make out a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the trail. The person stood there like a wooden statue. Then, with a sudden and eerily smooth movement, the shadow slipped into the bushes on the left side. My heart skipped a beat. To keep Dean from panicking, I pretended I didn't see anything. "It's nothing. You're just seeing things. Let's keep moving," I said. We kept walking, but I swear I heard the sound of leaves rustling right beside us. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of someone moving through the brush, keeping pace with us. I gripped Dean's hand and told him to walk faster. Finally, we made it out to the parking lot. But when I reached into my pocket, my heart dropped. I realized I had lost my keys. I searched every single pocket, but the keys were gone. I must have dropped them in the bleachers. I thought about going back to look for them, but the idea of leaving Dean alone in the middle of a dark parking lot terrified me. While I was hesitating, Dean grabbed my sleeve. He pointed a shaking finger toward the trail, his voice breaking. "Gray, look." I turned around. Under the faint glow of my phone light at the edge of the path, that man was standing there, staring right at us. He wasn't hiding anymore. He stood there, blocking the only path back to the baseball field. "It will be faster to walk home. It's only about 15 minutes. We'll stay on the streets with lights," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We started walking along the main road. I held Dean's hand tight. We walked very fast, but I tried not to run. I knew that in the dark, running might trigger a predator's instinct to chase. I glanced back. The man was still standing there, motionless. When I looked back a second time, he had started moving. He was following us, keeping a steady distance behind. Under the bright orange glow of the streetlights, I could see him clearly. He was very tall, very thin, and he was fiddling with something metal in his hand. The light reflected off a long, sharp knife blade. I squeezed Dean's hand tighter, my heart racing. Suddenly, the man started making strange noises. It wasn't a scream. It was a series of choked, trembling moans like an injured animal. The sound grew louder and more frantic. "Gray," Dean whispered, his voice shaking violently. "Keep walking fast, but don't run," I said. I was panicking inside, but I had to stay calm for him. We sped up, and so did he. The distance between us didn't change. His moaning became louder and more crazed. As we turned onto the final stretch of road toward my girlfriend's house, we heard heavy footsteps behind us. He was charging at us at full speed. "Run!" I yelled. We ran for our lives. The footsteps were getting closer. The moaning had turned into a wild growl. I didn't dare look back for even a second. My girlfriend's house was right in front of us. We jumped onto the sidewalk and dove into the bushes next to the front door. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. I texted her, "Open the door now! Emergency!" The footsteps stopped at the end of the driveway. I hid behind the bushes, hugging Dean close and putting my hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. Through the leaves, I saw the man standing in the middle of the street. He was turning his head back and forth, searching for us. The streetlight showed his face. He was pale, his eyes were wide and bulging, and his mouth was hanging open as he continued to moan. The front door swung open and light poured out. Dean and I bolted from the bushes and scrambled up the porch steps. I slammed the door shut and turned all 3 locks. My girlfriend stood there, looking completely confused until she saw the sheer terror on our faces. "Call the police," I gasped, breathless from exhaustion. Looking out the window, the man was still in the middle of the street. He was pacing in circles, moaning and still clutching the knife. He even started frantically kicking over the neighbors' trash cans. The police arrived quickly, but the man had already disappeared into the shadows of the neighborhood. They searched the area but found no trace of him. They took our statements and promised to patrol the area more often. The next morning, I went back to the baseball field with a few friends. We found my keys wedged in a gap between the wooden boards of the bleachers. As I held the cold metal keys in my hand, a horrifying thought hit me. If I had actually had my keys last night and tried to unlock the car, he might have attacked me while I was distracted at the door. Or worse, he might have been waiting in the back seat. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. But whenever I remember the sound of him chasing us, my heart still pounds with that same paralyzing fear. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
I am Nathan. When I was 10, I had the most memorable Halloween of my life. The morning of the 31st, I woke up with a high fever, almost 104 degrees. My mom put her hand on my forehead, shook her head, and told me I needed to rest. But I want to go trick-or-treating, I promised my friends. I looked at my vampire costume hanging on the chair. I'm so sorry, sweetie, Mom said. She tried to comfort me that there would be other Halloweens, but for a kid, waiting is never easy. I spent the whole day in bed, my body tired and aching. I felt helpless, listening to the sound of my friends shouting happily outside. As evening came, our doorbell kept ringing with trick or treat. Kids were coming to our house for candy. I figured my friends were gathering to go trick-or-treating too. I pulled the blankets over my head, feeling a sting in my nose, but tried to sleep so I wouldn't hear, wouldn't know anything else. I don't know what time it was, but I opened my eyes and the fever had broken. My body felt much lighter. But when I checked the clock, it was past 11 p.m. I sat up with a sigh and looked out the window. The streets were silent. Only the Halloween decorations' lights were dimly shining. Halloween was over. My heart felt heavy. I got out of bed and walked over to where my vampire costume was hanging. I had put so much effort into it. I figured I would wear it just to make it worth something. I put the cape over my shoulders, clipped the fangs into my mouth, and put on the hat. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to smile, but only felt sadder. As I stood in front of the mirror, something flew past the window. It was so fast I only managed to catch a black streak. I turned my head to look out. Nothing. I figured my eyes were just tired from the fever. But a few seconds later, the dark shape reappeared. This time, I saw it more clearly. It flashed by with a shrieking sound, like the painful breath of an animal. My heart started pounding fast. I stood still for a few seconds to watch more before slowly stepping toward the window. Outside was the familiar neighborhood scene. Nothing unusual. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to look out without daring to open the window all the way. I sighed in relief, ready to turn around, when suddenly something jumped onto the roof of a car parked nearby. I jumped, screaming while stumbling backward. It was a very tall creature. Its head was large, tilted to one side. In the darkness, I could only see pitch-black outlines with bumpy, lumpy details all over its body. It wasn't standing still, but writhing, its body contracting and then stretching out. Its mouth was wide open, emitting a sound like a moan mixed with a stifled scream. I wanted to run, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. My mind was blank, so terrified, but unable to take my eyes off the thing outside. It was a demon, a real demon. Then it turned its head and looked at me. Its two deep, black eye sockets were like bottomless pits. My mouth was dry. I couldn't utter a word. Then what I saw was even more terrifying. It smiled. That distorted face broke into a smile wide to its ears, its sharp teeth glinting in the dark. It was a smile of delight, as if it had just found a new toy. It seemed to be trying to get to me. Its movements were nothing like how a human moves. It started to crawl closer to my room window. Its head was still tilted, its eyes still fixed on me. I felt a warm stream run down my legs. I had peed my pants, but my entire body still couldn't move. The demon was getting closer and closer. Now I could clearly see every detail on its body. Wrinkled skin, jagged spikes growing out, blood dripping from its lips. It put a hand on the glass. 5 long fingers with curved claws. Next, its disgusting face pressed close against the pane, and it smiled again. The scream burst from my throat with all my strength. I screamed continuously, non-stop. A few seconds later, I heard feet running heavily down the hallway. My door flew open and my parents rushed in. "Nathan, what is it?" Mom hugged me, and I could only point a trembling finger toward the window. I stammered, unable to form words. Dad looked outside, his face pale. The demon was still there. Now, under the light of my room, it was clearer. It wasn't still, but jumping around excitedly. Its mouth was wide open, signaling something. Its hands were waving wildly, pointing toward our front door, and then pointing behind itself. Mom hugged me tighter, and Dad stared out. Silence lasted a few seconds. Then Dad frowned. "Wait a minute." Dad stepped closer to the window, leaning in to observe. The creature kept frantically waving its hands, but now I realized its actions looked more like it was pleading for help than threatening. Dad opened the window a small crack and asked, "Are you in trouble?" The creature nodded frantically, then pointed behind itself. Dad looked in that direction and burst out laughing. Mom and I just looked at each other, confused. Dad opened the window, and the creature immediately leapt inside. As soon as it was in, it fell to the floor, panting. Mom and I stood watching the scene before us, utterly bewildered. I heard a loud dog bark, and when I looked back toward the window, I saw a pit bull standing there and barking fiercely. My dad asked what was wrong, and the creature slowly sat up. It raised its hands and pulled off the rubber mask. Underneath the mask was a young man, face bright red, sweating buckets. He was gasping for air. "Thank you. Thank you so much." His voice was trembling. I stood there with the most surprised look on my face. His costume was truly incredible. "That dog has been chasing me since the beginning of the street," he explained, wiping his sweat. "I was in a costume contest at a nearby pub. On my way back, it just jumped out of nowhere. I ran for a long time, climbed onto a few cars, but it kept chasing me. I saw your light was on, so I tried to call for help. Sorry for disturbing your family." Mom released me, sighing in relief. "Oh my God, thank goodness it was just a person." Dad poured the young man a glass of water. "Did you make this costume yourself?" "It really looks terrifying." He nodded, forcing a smile. "I worked on it for 3 months. I guess I went a little overboard." He looked over at me, still standing frozen. "I'm sorry, kid." "I didn't mean to scare you." I couldn't answer. Watching him sit there, the demon costume hanging loosely on him, I suddenly felt like laughing. The thing that had scared me so badly I peed my pants was just a guy running away from a pit bull. After the pit bull was taken away by its owner, the young man thanked my family and left. I changed my clothes and sat on my bed, looking at the demon mask he had given me. I was still shaking a little, but this time not from fear, but from excitement. The fever was gone, and I was holding the most unexpected Halloween gift, a terrifyingly realistic homemade mask. I had missed trick-or-treating with my friends, but instead, I had a Halloween night no one could have imagined. A night when a demon knocked on my window to escape a dog. I kept the mask safe and promised myself I would be healthy enough to never miss another Halloween night. But it wasn't until I was 16 that I finally grew into that mask. My name is Alvin. I work at a distribution center about a 40-minute drive from my house. The job is backbreaking, and my shift usually ends at 2 a.m. If you've ever driven home at that hour in the middle of February, you know how lonely the roads can get. This happened 3 years ago during a brutal winter. It had been snowing since noon, and by the time I clocked out, the roads were a mess. My car was old and didn't handle well in the snow, so I had to drive slowly. The radio that night reported a semi-truck had flipped over, blocking both lanes of the highway I usually take. I was exhausted, my back was aching, and I just wanted to get home, so I decided to take a shortcut. This route cut through miles of farmland and thick woods. At 2 a.m. in the winter, there was nothing but a black void. I'd been driving for about 20 minutes. The heater was blasting at full power, but I was still shivering. The blowing snow made it hard to see anything beyond the reach of my headlights. That's when I saw something on the right shoulder, a lump sticking out of a snowbank. As I got closer, I realized the shape was a person. It looked like a man lying face down, half buried in the snow. My first thought was that he had likely been in an accident. I slowed down and looked around for a wrecked car, but the ditch was pretty deep, so it could have been hidden. I pulled over on the opposite side of the road and rolled down my window. "Hey!" I yelled, but the person didn't move. I shifted the car into park but kept the engine running. I went to call 911, but I had no signal. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and stepped out into the cold. "Hey, can you hear me?" I shouted again as I walked toward him. I was about 10 feet away when the man suddenly moved. He didn't groan or struggle to get up like an injured person would. He sat straight up, almost like he had popped up on a spring. When he turned to look at me, I noticed he was fairly young, maybe in his 20s. He wasn't wearing gloves, he wasn't shivering, and his face wasn't pale from the cold. Instead, it was flushed and full of life. "Help! My leg! I think it's broken!" he screamed. I stopped in my tracks because his voice was incredibly loud and steady, not shaking at all. More importantly, his eyes were locked onto my car behind me. "Where's your car?" "Were you in a wreck?" I asked, taking a step back. "It's in the woods," he yelled, pointing vaguely into the darkness behind him without even looking. "Come help me up. I can't walk." My suspicion was growing by the second. I took another step back toward my car. "I'm going to drive up the road to find a signal and call an ambulance for you." The man's face changed instantly. He looked furious. "Just get over here and help me," he barked. Then I saw it. Deep in the trees behind him, my headlights caught a reflection off of something metal. The next second, two dark figures charged out of the brush. The man in the snow scrambled to his feet and lunged at me. The two others sprinted toward the road to surround me. I spun around and bolted. My boots were slipping on the ice, and I almost fell face first. I dove into my car, and just as I grabbed the handle to slam the door, my hand smacked hard against the glass. The man from the snow was right there. He grabbed the door frame, trying to yank it back open. At that range, I could see he was grinning ear to ear. I used every bit of my strength to slam the door shut and immediately hit the lock button. The other two reached the car. One started yanking violently on the passenger door handle. The other was trying to smash the back window with something heavy, maybe a tire iron or a large rock. I floored the gas pedal. The guy on my side started punching the glass, screaming obscenities. The car lurched forward, and I nearly hit the man on the driver's side as he jumped back. I straightened the wheel and pushed the gas to the floor. I didn't stop until I reached a state police barracks. I ran inside like a madman, shaking and gasping for air. I told the officer everything. They immediately dispatched a patrol car to the location. They didn't catch them. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. But the officer told me later what they found. There were multiple sets of footprints in the snow, and behind the trees, right where those two men had been hiding, they found a pile of heavy rocks and a coil of rope. The officer told me straight up that they weren't just trying to carjack me. If they just wanted the car, they would have pulled me out and driven off. The rope suggested they wanted to take me with them, or tie me up and leave me in the woods to freeze to death. Since that night, I never take shortcuts. If I ever see someone lying in the snow again, I'll call 911, but I'm keeping the car moving. It might sound cold, but the look on that man's face that night killed my sense of charity.
Someone wrote a message on the bathroom mirror while I was living alone. I'm Carrie, 31 years old. I'm really independent. When I turned 18, I moved out to start living on my own and be independent. At first, I stayed in a rundown mobile home that my cousin lent me. I worked 2 jobs at the same time. I was a waitress during the day and a bartender at night. I went a different route compared to my friends who were the same age. Everyone else went to college and then looked for a job. But I decided to earn money first, find a comfortable place to live, and then either go to college or stick with the job I was doing. After 4 years of working hard, I saved up some money. I rented a small house to gradually improve my quality of life. The house I rented belongs to Mr. Robbie, who's 56 years old. The house is pretty close to the center. There were quite a few things that needed fixing in the house, but I was able to tackle them while I was moving in. I also spent quite a bit on furniture. The biggest expense was the wardrobe for the bedroom. I was hoping Uncle Robbie would have one and leave it for me, but I was a bit disappointed. My budget was almost gone, but I had my own house. I was still working 2 jobs and was constantly busy, coming and going late. Even though I had a nice house, I was only home for about 5 to 6 hours a day. One night, I came home at 11 p.m. feeling awful. I usually came home around that time, but that day, on top of my usual fatigue, my feet were sore from standing for hours. All I wanted to do was soak in the tub. When I entered the bathroom, I paused for a few seconds as the hot steam surrounded me, and I noticed some wet spots on the floor. I guessed that someone from the construction team had used the toilet, but why didn't they use the one in the living room? I thought to myself as I walked over to the bathtub and turned on the water. When I went back to the bedroom to get my pajamas, I stopped in front of a large mirror. Let's talk a bit about the bathroom design in my room. It would have been fine if there wasn't a huge mirror in there. It was 1.5 times taller than me and wider than my arm's length. I wondered why Uncle Robbie needed such a huge mirror in the bathroom. I also thought about redesigning the mirror in the bathroom, but couldn't get to it yet, since I needed to prioritize other areas. Back to that evening. What made me space out for a few minutes was the message written in steam on the mirror. I can see you. I figured it was someone from the construction team who wrote it. He seemed like the funny type. I wiped the words away and quickly got back to relaxing. About a week later, all the repairs and construction in the house were finished. Seeing the final results, I felt proud and a bit emotional. I finally had a comfortable bedroom to come home to after long, tiring work hours. A safe and secure parking spot. These things motivated me to work even harder. One morning, I walked into the bathroom still half asleep. With my eyes half closed, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my teeth. When I washed my face, I suddenly got startled. "Have a nice day. Are you ignoring me?" My nerves instantly went on high alert. I looked around the bathroom and bedroom, then ran down to check the kitchen and living room. I checked all the doors in the house. The main door and the back door had been completely replaced, and the windows had new locks. They were all still locked and showed no signs of tampering. I was sure I'd kept them locked since I wasn't home very often. With a baseball bat in hand, I checked every nook and cranny of the house to see if someone might be hiding. In fact, there was nowhere to hide in the small house, and I couldn't find anyone or anything suspicious. I pulled out my phone and called Uncle Robbie to ask if there were any other entrances to the house. "Do you mean rats?" "No, I mean a human passageway." Uncle Robbie assured me firmly that there were no other entrances. "Maybe the construction workers left it there just to mess with you." I thought the same thing after seeing that the furniture was still intact and tidy. There was no sign of any disturbance or intrusion in the house. I put it aside, and everything went on as usual for the next week, until that fateful night, when I woke up to go to the bathroom. Another line appeared on the mirror, and this time, it wasn't just a message. "I will haunt you." I reacted strongly and called Uncle Robbie again, even though it was already midnight. It wasn't until the third call that he finally answered. Without letting him speak, I bombarded him with questions about the mirror in the bathroom. "Do you remember me telling you about the special arrangement of things in the bedroom?" Uncle Robbie's words surprised me. Had I missed something? "There's going to be a large wardrobe in the bathroom instead of the bedroom." "But I don't see a wardrobe, just a huge mirror." I told Uncle Robbie and pushed the mirror. It suddenly moved, like a door opening, and behind it was indeed a large, dark wardrobe. When the glass opened wide, I was startled to see a man's face. His hair was messy, his eyes were wide open, and his mouth was grinning widely. The darkness of the wardrobe seemed to swallow his body, making it look like a floating head was smiling at me. I screamed as loud as I could, and on the phone, I could hear Uncle Robbie's anxious voice calling my name. I rushed out of the house, hid in the car, locked the doors, and called the police. The police found the strange man still hiding in there. In the wardrobe were a few personal belongings, some canned food and household items that I thought I had lost. The man didn't explain or answer any questions from the police. He was sometimes sullen and fierce, and other times cheerful and smiling. After that traumatic event, I continued to live in the house for about a year. I'm now living in a more complete apartment, studying for a university degree, and managing a restaurant. I always feel lucky that the intruder was just a man who wasn't in his right mind, and not some cold-blooded murderer. My roommate intends to kill me. I am Baron, living in a small house with 2 bedrooms. I posted an ad looking for someone to share the rent with. Even though I don't want to live with someone else, especially not a stranger. After a week of posting ads for a roommate on various websites, I met Dante, who was the same age as me. Dante moved in with nothing but a single backpack. He was tall, very thin, with an expressionless face and eyes that always carried a constant look of exhaustion. After taking a tour around the house, we discussed some essential details about living together. Everything I brought up, Dante agreed to without a second thought. He had only one issue he wanted to discuss with me up front. I often sleepwalk. I wonder if that will bother you. I used to sleepwalk myself and had to undergo treatment for a while. Moreover, we have separate bedrooms, so I comfortably replied, "That's not a big issue for me." Having an additional person living with me wasn't as inconvenient as I had imagined. We didn't have the same schedules, so we didn't run into each other very often. The house also felt less empty. One night, I jolted awake when I heard Dante screaming loudly. I hurried to his room to check on the situation. "Are you okay?" I called out loudly while knocking on the door, trying to drown out Dante's screams. But immediately, he stopped screaming, and everything fell silent again. I tried turning the doorknob. He hadn't locked the door. Looking into the room, he was still asleep, as if nothing had happened. He must have been sleepwalking, I thought, and went back to bed. A few months later, everything went back to normal. I noticed that he didn't have any family or friends. In the several months he's been living here, I haven't seen anyone visit him. He also didn't have any phone calls with anyone. That's what I observed. He also didn't go out for leisure. He only went to the supermarket to buy some essentials and then returned home. One night, Dante screamed loudly again. This time, I ran over, opened his door without calling out first, but as soon as I opened the door, everything felt eerily silent, and he was still sound asleep. In the following days, everything went back to normal. One night, I jolted awake in the middle of the night. In the corner of the room, a tall, thin figure stood staring at me with lifeless eyes. I sat up, screamed loudly, and quickly turned on the light. "Dante!" I exclaimed in an irritated tone. "What are you doing in my room?" He didn't answer, standing still like a statue. I walked over and gave him a firm pat on the shoulder. Dante woke up, and after realizing what was happening, he repeatedly apologized and went back to his room. I couldn't go back to sleep. The image of Dante in the darkness kept playing tricks on my mind. Wait a minute, I clearly locked my door. Realizing this anomaly, I raised a big question about him and started to be more cautious. In the following nights, I couldn't sleep well. I had trouble falling asleep, kept waking up suddenly, and felt as though I was being watched. One night, I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. Not long after, I jolted awake when I heard a noise that sounded like a door closing. I sat up, turned on the light, and looked around the room, but didn't see anything unusual. I walked over to the door, placing my hand on it with suspicion, and my heart was pounding. I turned the doorknob and was shocked to find that the door wasn't locked. But I swear I checked the lock at least 3 times before going to bed. Looking at Dante's room across the hall, a sense of tension and exhaustion overwhelmed me. I felt regretful for having found a roommate. I needed to have a clear conversation with him to find a solution. The next day, I left the house feeling extremely exhausted. The mountain of work that needed to be done left me drained. Returning home at 6 p.m., I collapsed into bed and fell asleep immediately. The screams rang out again, but it was very close, very loud, with a tone of pain and anger. I thought if I kept being pushed into such a state of panic and fear, my heart would eventually explode. I fumbled around, unable to find the light switch. Panicking and extremely scared, I also screamed loudly, joining in with the screams. Finally, the light was turned on. It was Dante, standing right behind my bed, hands holding the knife. His face was fierce with his eyes rolling wild, his mouth agape, all came down upon a scream. I stood on the bed, huddled into the corner of the room, my heart racing as if it might stop. He suddenly collapsed, kneeling on the floor with his head bowed, still holding tightly onto a knife. Minutes passed, and I didn't see any further reaction from him. I grabbed my phone, hurriedly fled the room, went to the garage, and drove away. After driving a good distance away from the house, I checked the clock and saw it was after 3 a.m. I decided to sleep in the car and parked in the local church's parking lot. At 8 a.m., I drove back home. I guessed that Dante would be awake and that I would need to talk to him. But Dante was gone. He had moved out during the night. I called him, but couldn't get in touch. 2 months later, my lease ended. While cleaning up the house, I discovered a box in Dante's room. Inside there were many photographs of me sleeping, each one clearly dated. A key. I used it and opened my bedroom door. Sleepwalking might be causing Dante to behave in this disturbing way. Because he woke up in time that night, Dante stopped before he could harm me. Feeling guilty and embarrassed, he left. It's also possible that sleepwalking is just an excuse for him to carry out some evil intentions. Afraid that I would call the police, Dante quickly escaped and left behind this box. Regardless of the situation, I thank God that I am still safe. I have moved to another state, but what happened with Dante still haunts me every night. The secret behind Dante's actions remains a frightening mystery that I do not want to explore further. The notes and diary I found in the forest led to one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. I'm Benny, 35 years old. I love traveling to different places, discovering new things, and documenting it all. I have a YouTube channel where I share my real experiences with people who have the same interests. Over time, my hobby turned into a passion, and it even started helping me make some extra money. Last fall, I took a trip to explore a forest that's about a 4-hour drive from where I live. I planned to stay in the forest for a night or two and brought all the gear I needed. By the time I got to the forest, it was already late afternoon. There was still a bit of weak sunlight, just enough for me to look around and find a spot to settle for the night. The forest wasn't super wild or dense. From what I could tell, a lot of people had been there to explore before. I saw names carved into the trees, along with some water bottles, plastic bags, and leftover fast food boxes. As I ventured further into the forest, I spotted a few interesting things under a white oak tree. There were scraps of paper wedged with small stones at both ends, and they had personal notes written on them. The water bottles and flat stones were covered with song lyrics, and there were a ton of them. I felt curious and a bit intrigued, so I skimmed through everything that was written. The handwriting was kind of scribbled. There were a few cigarette butts left behind, so I figured this must have been a guy. The scene was pretty fresh. The pieces of paper were still white, and the handwriting hadn't been damaged by rain or dew. He must have left not too long ago. While looking around, I found another bag under the tree next to me. Inside was a thick red liquid, mixed with some chunks that I couldn't tell if they were meat or something else. A smell of decay hit me, and I thought it was coming from the stuff in the bag, until I saw a duck head with a long neck, decomposing right next to it. An electronic device was in pretty bad shape. I figured it had been smashed with a lot of force. At first, I thought it was a smartwatch, but when I tried it on, it was way too big for my wrist. For a moment, I thought of a device used to track the behavior of prisoners after they're released. It's worn on the ankle. I tried it on and it fit my ankle perfectly. I found another notebook a few steps away, picked it up, and saw that it was in perfect condition. It was getting dark really fast, and the rustling sound of dry leaves startled me. I quickly left before I ran into any other dangerous animals. I found the perfect spot to spend the night, a small wooden house. After checking, I didn't find any belongings or items left behind by the previous person. I took out my stuff and started getting dinner ready with confidence. After I finished eating, I pulled out the notebook I'd picked up earlier to read. A notebook looked pretty ordinary on the outside and didn't have the owner's name on it. As I flipped through the first pages, there were scribbles and a few random sentences about life. Mike Jones, prisoner at San Quentin State Prison, released on May 30th. Reading that, I immediately felt a shiver. I knew this Mike. He was reported by the media and police in California to have died over a month ago, right after getting a 15-year prison sentence. He was a pervert with 13 charges, including violence, theft, and attempted murder, but he didn't succeed. Mike talked about what happened during his sentence, how he was beaten by other inmates, and how many times he tried to end his life, but failed. My nerves were on edge when I realized the handwriting in this notebook was similar to the handwriting on the pieces of paper and plastic bottles from earlier that day. So, I had accidentally wandered into the territory of a dangerous person. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and I was startled. My heart was pounding like crazy. I didn't answer or open the door. I just sat quietly, listening and waiting to see what would happen. After about 10 minutes, I slowly opened the door and looked outside, but no one was there. On the ground was a plastic bottle with a note that said, "Get out of here now. I saw you." I had just received a threat and a warning. It wasn't clear if that person was Mike Jones or not, but who knows what they might do next. On top of that, I don't have any weapons to defend myself. I quickly packed up my stuff and left the forest that night. I hoped I wouldn't run into any more trouble. Luckily, I got out of the forest safely and found a motel to stay in. Right after that, I called the police to report everything I'd found and sent them the video I had recorded. The next morning, I drove back home. That afternoon, I saw on the news that Mike Jones had been found and arrested by the police. He was sent back to prison because of his defiant behavior. Since then, I haven't had the guts to explore the forest again. It's a place with a lot of cool things to experience, but there are also potential dangers that can be hard to handle. The story is based on a true event about a YouTuber's scary camping trip. He really loves nature and has a passion for exploring new places. He recorded his trips and experiences and shared them on YouTube for people who have the same passion. After that scary evening, the young man gained a new perspective and learned to be more careful and alert on future trips. An incident happened that made me swear off running at night for good. I'm really into exercising and playing sports, but since I spend most of my day working, running at night seems like the best option. In an evening, after wrapping up a ton of work, I grabbed a quick snack, changed into my running gear, and headed down to the park below my apartment to blow off some steam. The park was empty at the time, but suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I instinctively turned my head and was startled to see a tall, dark figure running behind me. I started running faster, and my heart was racing out of control. But I could feel the person behind me getting closer and closer. My mind started racing with all sorts of worst-case scenarios. The more I ran, the faster I went, all flustered and panicked, with my heart pounding so hard it was tough to breathe. Not daring to turn around, I glanced to the side and saw the person's dark shadow falling onto the road right next to me. There was a couple being intimate up ahead, so I didn't hesitate to run over and shout for help. The girl in the beautiful white dress got up and walked over to me with a surprised look on her face. I gasped, turned around, and saw someone in a tracksuit running past. "Are you okay?" the girl in the white dress asked, looking worried. Now that I looked closer, she was really beautiful. She must have been on a date with her boyfriend. I gave a shy smile and thanked her. I curiously looked toward the boyfriend, but his face was hidden in the darkness, so I couldn't see him clearly. I thanked the girl again and left. Deciding to wrap up my jog, I was shocked to realize that my phone was missing. I froze for a few seconds trying to remember, and then realized I must have dropped it while trying to escape from my pursuer. I immediately ran back the way I came to find my phone. After searching around but still not finding it, I suddenly remembered the smartwatch I was wearing. Following the signal from the watch, I headed to the children's playground. But I had never run to this area before. Moreover, it was darker than the other areas. The playground equipment looked eerie and distorted in the darkness, creating strange shapes. The wind whistling through the dry branches, the chirping of insects, and even the weird sound of footsteps echoing in the dark. All of this turned what was usually a fun and lovely area into a place of horror and fear. I checked the signal on the watch again, and it definitely showed it was here. As I got closer to the playground, I heard music playing and was relieved to have found my phone. After wandering around the slide and seesaw for a while, all I could hear was the music from the phone. I turned around to look at the two swings a few meters away. I screamed in surprise, my heart racing and my head spinning. Someone was sitting on the swing on the left. "Who is it?" I said, my voice trembling like I was about to cry. That person didn't answer. The swing kept moving back and forth, the chains creaking, and the sound of water droplets slowly dripping made my legs feel weak. It looked like a girl in a long dress, but her back was turned, so I couldn't see her face clearly. My phone rang, and it was coming from that girl. She must have picked it up. "I dropped my phone with the pink case. Have you seen it around here?" The silence was still there, and it was haunting and unsettling beyond description. I slowly approached the girl. The phone rang even louder. Suddenly, the phone fell to the ground with a loud clatter, breaking the eerie silence. My whole body jumped. I quickly ran over and grabbed the phone right at the girl's feet. Holding the phone in my hand, I didn't have time to feel relieved. The phone was covered in a thick, fishy liquid. I was hit by that horrible smell for a few seconds. Looking down at where I'd just picked up the phone, I saw drops of water still flowing down, and the girl didn't react at all. I trembled, turned on the flashlight on my phone, and shined it toward the girl. She had tears all over her face, neck, and chest, and her eyes were wide open in panic. Her red dress was soaked, and each drop of liquid slowly flowed from her feet to the ground. It was the girl who had been with her boyfriend earlier. I ran as fast as I could, putting all my strength into it. I knew I had to get out of there quickly, because that murderer could still be nearby. When I got to the security room, I collapsed and quickly told them everything in 2 sentences. The security guard and I stayed in the room until the police arrived. I told the police everything that happened, especially about that tall man. He was the top suspect in the case, but unfortunately, I couldn't see his face clearly. But on the flip side, he knew my face very well. He also knew where I was and might be lurking around. I asked the police for round-the-clock protection. I installed more security cameras, alarms, and a more modern door lock system to make sure everything was safe. For 2 months, I lived in fear and confusion and hardly left the house. By the 3rd month, the police announced they'd caught the guy while he was hiding in a neighboring state. I moved in with my parents because I felt scared and panicked whenever I was alone. I avoided all dark, dimly lit areas, parks, and even playgrounds. I nearly got myself killed on my 19th birthday because I was being totally reckless. I am James, 30 years old. My scary experience went down 11 years ago. For my 19th birthday, I grabbed my two best buddies, Jim and Julian, and we decided to check out this old abandoned campsite in the woods. We decided to start exploring around 10 p.m. and figured we'd wrap it up before midnight to celebrate my birthday. With my immature mindset back then, I was super pumped, thinking this trip was going to be an awesome adventure and make me feel cooler than ever. The reason I knew about this campsite was because I went there when I was a kid. I came back there the week before and found out it was totally abandoned. That's why I wanted to check it out again. But I didn't expect it to be such a bad idea. After dinner, my two friends and I drove out to the campsite. Since we were all on the same page with our thoughts, opinions, and interests, we were totally pumped for the challenge we'd set up, laughing and chatting the whole way. About a mile from the campsite, we had to stop the car because a wood log was blocking the road. When we got out of the car to see what was up, we saw that the wooden beam had private area carved into it. I swear I didn't see this when I came here last week. I was quite surprised. Jim and Julian were really intrigued and even more curious. Just a few steps from the wooden beam, there was a triangular warning sign. We shined our flashlights on it and read, "Beware of dangerous dog." Jim suddenly burst out laughing and said, "What a joke!" Julian and I were a bit surprised at first, but then we got interested. We decided to leave the car and just walk into the campsite. Jim was walking around with his flashlight, and I had my phone out to record the whole cool adventure. We ventured deep into the forest, but before we got too far, we started hearing dogs barking in the dark. We stopped and exchanged glances. I whispered, "There really are dogs." Julian was pretty sure, saying, "I bet there's not just one, but at least 3. Our reckless curiosity made us more excited than scared, so we decided to push on further. We'd barely taken a few steps when a woman's loud scream freaked all 3 of us out. The scream was both angry and sad, and it was really haunting. "Turn off the lights," Jim whispered, and Julie and I instantly followed his lead. I could hear my heart pounding really hard. "What the heck is wrong with her?" I said. The scream stopped, so we waited a few more minutes, then turned the lights back on and kept going. The vibe got really tense, so we stopped talking and just stayed quiet. Out of nowhere, the woman's scream came back, this time way louder, like she had moved closer. We looked at each other, totally confused, turned off all the flashlights again, and just stood there listening. About 2 minutes later, we saw another flashlight shining from the other side. Not being able to make out who was in front of us, we just stood there in a daze, waiting for them to get closer. Jim turned on the flashlight, aimed it at the person, and said, "Hi." But what we saw froze all 3 of us in place. It was a woman in a white dress. No clue who she was. But what really freaked us out was the big axe she was holding tight and pointing right at us. We turned around and bolted as fast as we could, using every bit of alertness and speed we had left. As we ran, we screamed for our moms and for God. The woman was super fast. She chased after us and yelled, "I'll kill all of you, you assholes!" We ran in a panic and got separated in the dark. After running for a bit, I turned off the flashlight, hid in the bushes, and kept praying. Hearing Jim's scared screams and the dog barking, my heart just sank. With my hands shaking, I grabbed my phone to call the cops, but it felt like it was weighing a ton. After waiting 10 minutes, which felt like forever, I finally heard a police siren. I couldn't get up or move because I was too scared that danger was still out there. "Is anyone here?" a police officer called out loudly. I quickly turned on the flashlight to signal him, and they took me back to the car. When I saw Jim, my best friend, covered in cuts and bruises, I started crying. Julian was lucky to be okay, but he was totally crushed. The crazy woman kept screaming and fighting the cops, and it took 3 people to take her down. That night we were taken to the hospital. Jim had to be rushed to the ER because of blood loss, and Julian and I just got a general checkup. The next morning, once we were feeling a bit better, Julian and I were called into the police station to give our side of the story. After checking out the abandoned campsite, the cops found a bunch of stuff used for pagan rituals, 4 German mastiffs, and a lot of animal carcasses. The woman was arrested, and they started looking into it further. It took Jim 3 months to bounce back, both physically and mentally. We haven't done any more wild challenges since then, and we've realized that being reckless is like messing with your own safety and life. This story is based on a real event involving a Belgian YouTuber's experience. On December 29th, 2023, he and 2 friends drove into the forest to check out an old abandoned campsite. Their recklessness almost got them into serious trouble, and it ended up being a huge psychological shock.
Ryan and I have been close friends ever since I was 7. We used to be neighbors, and we were very mischievous. When Ryan and I were 16, our appearances were truly strange. I had piercings in any spot I could, wore bright neon colors, and had long hair that covered most of my face. Ryan, on the other hand, preferred a rather slick look, having all his hair and eyebrows shaved, and wearing tight-fitting clothes. At the age when many psychological changes occur, we became even more disliked in the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood. Not a single family was unaware of our bad reputation, nor any of them had ever escaped our bizarre pranks. However, we would only take things as far as playful teasing, with no intention of hurting others or engaging in criminal activities. Let's see what game we'll play today. According to the list, which house should we go to? I discussed with Ryan. The house at the end of the street just had new people move in, Ryan said. Is it that abandoned house? I asked, surprised. Let's go check it out. We were both really excited. The abandoned house at the end of the street was forgotten, but Ryan and I loved it. We even called it our secret base. It was true that someone had moved in because the front door had been replaced, and the surrounding area had been tidied up. Ryan and I approached and knocked on the door after curiously surveying the house. The door slowly opened, and a woman appeared. She had pale skin, sunken eyes, and a completely expressionless face. I guessed she must be in her 60s. Hello, ma'am. We live in this neighborhood too. You just moved in, right? I confidently greeted her. What is it? Her voice was so cold that I shivered, and there was a very unpleasant smell. I was stunned, staring at her face until Ryan nudged my arm gently. We have a small gift to welcome you, I said, presenting a small box. The woman stared at it for a moment before taking it, and the unpleasant smell returned as she said thank you. Ryan tugged at my shirt, and we quickly left. We peeked outside the gate to watch the woman's reaction to the gift we had given her. She opened the box, and a toad jumped out, but contrary to our expectations, she remained completely calm. What? Is this the first time we failed? Ryan exclaimed, surprised. Did you smell that really awful odor earlier? I asked Ryan, who looked at me puzzled. Ryan and I turned our gaze back to the woman. Both of us froze as we watched her stuff the creature into her mouth and chew ravenously. Elton, did you see that? Ryan's voice trembled. I didn't answer. We could both clearly see the frog's hind legs still swaying in rhythm with her chewing. I pulled Ryan away, both of us silent with our own thoughts. Eventually, we agreed to keep observing that woman. The next day, after school, we watched her again, but from a different angle. It seemed like she lived alone. After a while without seeing her, we were about to leave when we heard a noise. The woman had returned. It turned out she hadn't been home all this time. She was carrying a large sack, but she was surprisingly agile, which is unusual for someone as old as her. Whatever was inside the sack seemed to be moving. However, it didn't seem to interfere with the way she swiftly dazzled between places. "Neither of us would be able to move it, Elton," Ryan whispered. "I've told you before, she's all but normal," I muttered. But the surprises just didn't stop there. The woman went toward the backyard of the house, pulling out a healthy, living chicken from the bag. Ryan and I both understood that the bag was filled with chickens, and there must be dozens of them inside. The chicken struggled violently, flapping its wings wildly, its beak screaming in fear. The woman, without a moment's hesitation, gripped the chicken tightly with both hands, and suddenly bit down deeply into its neck. The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Hot red blood splashed out, flowing down her face and hands. The woman's mouth was full of blood, red patches of raw flesh between her teeth. She chewed voraciously, the wet crunching sound echoing in the still air. The chicken was still alive, writhing in pain, its eyes wide with panic as life slowly drained from its body. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. He seemed desperate to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I swallowed hard. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, my hands gripping Ryan's so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Cold sweat rolled down my forehead, each drop falling onto my face, merging with the thick, suffocating atmosphere of fear. We wanted to look away, but we couldn't. Our eyes were glued to the scene of the crazed woman, ravenously gnawing at the chunks of the chicken, while our bodies trembled, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of the horror overwhelming us. Ryan's backpack dropped to the ground, cutting through the eerie atmosphere like a knife. The woman turned towards us, her gaze like a jolt to the brain, snapping us back to reality. Ryan and I ran without pausing to grab our backpacks, our hands tightly clasped together. When we got to Ryan's house, his parents saw our frantic state and thought we had just gotten into trouble again. Both of us hurriedly recounted the incident, but all we got in return were annoyed expressions from Ryan's parents. We stormed back into Ryan's room. "Are you saying we should go back to that creepy woman's place?" Ryan exclaimed when he heard me mention wanting to figure things out. "Your backpack is still there," Ryan, helpless against my convincing reasoning. That evening, we arranged to conduct our investigation after dinner. Ryan's backpack was still there. There was a faint sound of crying, but loud enough for me and Ryan to hear. We exchanged glances, searching for the source of the sound. From inside the house, the woman emerged, still carrying a large sack over her shoulder. She set it down in the yard, slowly removing the outer layer to reveal a trembling little boy around 5 or 6 years old. Immediately, I grabbed Ryan, holding him tightly with one hand while covering his mouth with the other. With a sudden motion, she grabbed the child's wrist and yanked him toward herself. The baby screamed in fear, but the scream was quickly muffled as her bony hand tightened. Her fingers dug into the child's skin. She leaned close to the baby's face, smelling the scent of the soft skin, her eyes sparkling with madness. "Fresh meat," she muttered like an evil curse, her voice mixed with crazy laughter of someone who had completely lost their reason. Her hands clawed and her mouth opened wide as if preparing to tear the baby apart. Ryan and I shouted loudly, rushing to pull the baby out of that crazy woman's clutches. The brawl quickly got everyone's attention. They quickly arrived and called the police. The woman tried to run away but was stopped. She emitted a smell that made everyone hold their breath. The police showed up to control the woman. Inside her house, countless pieces of bones, meat, and other animals were found trapped and rotting. She was taken to a mental hospital after the police and doctors concluded that she had a mental illness due to living in isolation for a long time. No information or identification documents of hers were found. After only 2 weeks, she escaped from the hospital and disappeared. Although the police's conclusion was due to illness and circumstances, I thought that woman was like the reincarnation of Satan.
I once accepted help from a demon. I am Grace, and I have 2 little kids. One evening over 2 years ago, I was driving to visit my mom in a neighboring town with my kids. Due to work obligations, I set off quite late, around 9 p.m., and planned to stay overnight at my mom's house. At that time, my eldest daughter was almost 2 years old, and I was 7 months pregnant with my second son. As I drove on the relatively empty highway, I started to notice a car behind me. "It has been following me for quite a while, hasn't it?" I mumbled, then focused on driving. After driving a bit further, the car behind me began to honk and flash its headlights. I thought they wanted to pass, so I moved a little closer to the shoulder. But the car continued to stay behind me, constantly honking, which was really annoying. After about 10 minutes of this, my nerves frayed, and I pulled over to the side of the road. The car stopped right behind mine. With a mother's protective instinct, I checked the locks on all 4 doors, quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. A tall man was looking into my car and signaling for something. He was talking while pointing at the back of my car, and when he saw I wasn't reacting, he gestured for me to roll down the window to talk. I observed his demeanor, my mind racing with thoughts. Should I call the police? Does he need help? Seeing a sincere and trustworthy demeanor from the man, I rolled down the window just a bit, enough to hear what he was saying. "Do you need something?" I asked, sounding quite cautious. "Oh no, I just wanted to let you know that the left rear tire of your car is wobbling continuously. It's very dangerous." His demeanor and tone were very sincere, and I began to feel more at ease. I must have overthought this, I thought to myself. I got out of the car to check the rear tire, but I didn't see anything unusual. I also had no expertise in vehicles. But I felt everything was fine while driving. I looked at the man and asked. "But I'm afraid it won't last much longer," he replied quite confidently. "Let me call roadside assistance or the police. Thank you so much," I said while pulling out my phone to dial. "There's no need to waste time like that. I can help you." The man quickly interrupted me. "It's a simple issue. Just tighten the wheel." Seeing that I was still hesitant, the man continued. "I worked in a garage for a few months. This is a simple task. You seem to be in a hurry, and you have young kids with you, right?" My daughter woke up and unexpectedly called for me, and the situation completely convinced me. After about 15 minutes, the man announced that my car was fine. "Thank you so much. What's your name?" "No problem at all. I wish you a peaceful evening." He smiled, waved goodbye, and walked away. I thanked him once more and continued on my journey. But just after I drove a short distance, I started to feel the wobbling of the tire. The more I drove, the more the car shook, leaving me extremely anxious, while my daughter clung tightly to me and began to cry. I stopped the car again, got out and checked. "What bad luck," I muttered in frustration. A car coming from the opposite direction stopped. It was the man from earlier. "Is something wrong again?" he asked, concerned. "Well, the condition of the car is more serious. I think I need to call..." I must have messed up somewhere. I'm really sorry. Let me take you to the nearest gas station for help. Oh, no, thank you, but it's okay. I also have a part of the responsibility for your car. I decided to decline, but he didn't give me the chance. Once again, I was convinced. He politely opened the passenger door for my child and me. From that moment on, my 2 children and I officially faced the demon. After about 10 minutes of driving, we reached the nearest gas station, but he didn't stop. Instead, he accelerated and sped past it. He remained silent in response to my questions, his face cold and different from the friendly demeanor he had before. I began to feel a sense of fear. I quietly took out my phone, knowing I had to escape and call the police. Suddenly, a strong force yanked the phone from my hand, and I gasped and screamed. "Shut up! I'm not sure I can stay calm. You and your 2 children will soon meet God. Wait until I'm done playing." Each word he emphasized made me feel like I was turning to stone. My breath quickened as I held my daughter tightly, feeling my son kicking forcefully in my belly. I had to find a way to protect myself and my children. After nearly an hour sitting next to the demon, a heavy silence enveloped us as he drove faster and faster, my heart racing to the point of almost breaking. I quietly scanned the sides of the road in the rearview mirror, my body nearly drenched in sweat. At that moment, I quickly opened the car door, curled up tightly around my daughter, and jumped out into the road. Thank God for protection. My daughter and I landed on the shoulder with soft, grassy ground. My daughter burst into tears, and I held her tightly, unable to get up just yet. I heard the car slow down and then speed off. I knew we were temporarily safe. I checked my daughter's body, breathing heavily as I broke down in tears from the panic. I carried my daughter and ran to the nearest police station, reporting everything I had just experienced. The police quickly contacted medical personnel to check the health of me and my daughter. Looking at the sketch of the wanted murderer posted on the wall, my body suddenly went numb. Zodiac. He was the one who wanted to kill me. Immediately, the police requested to block off the roads that the murderer might take. By the time we reached the spot where I left my car, it had been burned to ashes. He had erased all traces. I was affected by the jump and had a premature birth, but fortunately, I was still able to care for and witness my 2 children grow up. I was placed under police protection and moved to another state after giving birth to my son 6 months later. This story is based on a true event related to one of the cases of the Zodiac, one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. The victim was a woman named Kathleen Johns. She arrived at the police station in a state of extreme panic, pointing at the sketch of the Zodiac on the wall and exclaiming, "That's the man who just tried to kill me." Kathleen was an incredibly fortunate survivor. To this day, the true identity of the self-proclaimed Zodiac killer remains a mystery. It is impossible to know the exact number of victims who died at his hands.
My name is Jessica. I'm 28 years old, and I've been working at a Taco Bell in West Los Angeles for 3 years now. Usually, the night shift is pretty quiet. We get a few customers after midnight, mostly long-haul truckers or people finishing up a late shift. But this was the worst night shift of my life. It was a night in late February, about 2 years ago. Around 2 a.m., I was wiping down the counters after serving the last group of customers. The store was so silent, I could hear the hum of the refrigerators. My coworker, Tony, was in the back kitchen prepping for the morning rush. The chime above the door rang. I looked up, ready to give my standard customer service smile, but the smile died on my face. A middle-aged man walked in. He immediately caught the attention of me and the few people dining in because of what he was wearing. Or rather, what he wasn't. All he had on was bright, neon-colored women's lingerie. He was also carrying a large canvas tote bag. "Hi there, how can I help you?" He didn't answer. His eyes weren't looking at the menu boards above. They were locked onto me. Suddenly, he pulled a large hammer out of his bag and pointed it at me as he leaned over the counter. I jumped back in shock. "Give me all the money," he growled. When he saw me freeze up, he hissed through his teeth, "Hurry up! Open the register and give me everything!" I tried to stay calm. I needed to draw enough attention so Tony would know what was happening in the back. I spoke much louder than usual. "What are you doing? You're going to rob us with a hammer?" "Shut up!" he roared. Then, he pulled a small sharp knife from his bag and aimed it at me. "Give me the cash, or I'll make you regret it." In that split second, my survival instinct kicked in. I wasn't going to just stand there and obey him. I spun around and ran toward the kitchen, toward my co-worker, and more importantly, my personal bag. Inside, I kept a canister of pepper spray that I carry everywhere. "Jessica!" "What's going on?" Tony asked when he saw me bolt into the kitchen with a look of pure panic. "There's a robber. Call the police," I screamed, while frantically digging through my bag for the spray. He chased me into the kitchen, faster than I expected. When I turned around, he was standing right in front of me. But this time, he wasn't holding the hammer or the knife. He was holding a gun. My heart felt like it stopped beating. "You thought you could run." He smirked in a terrifying way and slammed the butt of the gun into my shoulder. A wave of pain shot through my body, and I nearly fell over, but I kept my grip on the pepper spray. As he moved to strike me again, I lunged forward and sprayed it directly into his face. "You bitch!" he shrieked, clutching his face with both hands. His eyes turned blood red, tears streamed down his face, and he started swearing manically. I took the chance to run back to the counter, grabbed a tray of loose change, and threw it toward the back exit to distract him. Even though his eyes were burning, he wouldn't give up. He gripped the gun tight and racked the slide. "I'll shoot! I'll kill everyone!" he yelled, pointing the gun at me and then at Tony, who was standing by the phone, trying to dial 911. We stood there like statues, not daring to breathe. The air was thick with tension. One wrong move, and it would all be over. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and images of my family and friends flashed through my mind. I really thought I was going to die. Luckily, a customer outside had already called the cops. The distant sound of sirens made him panic. He scrambled to grab a few coins off the floor and bolted into the dark alley beside the store. The police arrived immediately and coordinated with a patrol helicopter to search the area. I could hear the roar of the helicopter engines above and saw the spotlight sweeping through the neighborhood. Tony put his arm around my shoulder, telling me it was over. About 20 minutes later, we heard over the police radio that they found him. According to the report, he had tried to outsmart the cops by changing his clothes as a disguise, but the helicopter's infrared camera spotted him hiding behind a large dumpster in an alley not far away. When the police closed in, he jumped out and pointed his gun at them. The officers drew their weapons and shouted for him to drop it. Then, something strange happened. He suddenly threw the gun to the ground and turned to run toward a high fence nearby. He tried to climb over to escape, but he wasn't fast enough. The police used a taser to bring him down. When the police inspected the evidence, they discovered the gun was actually just a toy air pistol. However, the hammer and the knife were very real. He was prosecuted, and under California law, he faced more than 5 years in prison. A few days later, I got a call from the police department. They praised me for my bravery and for being smart enough to handle a dangerous situation. They said I helped buy enough time for the officers to get there. My manager gave me a bonus and a few days of paid leave to recover. That was the most terrifying experience of my life, but it's when I realized how powerful it is to stay calm in the middle of a panic. Equipping yourself with self-defense skills is so important and essential, especially when you're a woman. Around 3 a.m. on January 28, 2025, at a fast food restaurant in West Los Angeles, a 41-year-old man named Hao used a hammer, a knife, and a toy gun to threaten a female employee for money. After being fended off with pepper spray, he fled when he heard police sirens. Police used a helicopter to track him down and successfully apprehended him. Hao was charged with 4 serious felonies and faces over 5 years in prison.
Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
My name is Melvin. When I was 22, I worked as a security guard at a lonely steel mill in Pennsylvania. My job was usually very quiet with long, boring shifts. That changed when a senior coworker retired and a guy named Logan was hired to replace him. From the moment I met him, Logan gave me an uneasy feeling. He was like the silence right before a massive storm. He was a huge man with deep-set eyes and a thick beard that covered half his face. Strange scars ran down his neck and across his knuckles. They looked like proof of a violent past. Logan rarely spoke. When he did talk, he said every word very slowly and with heavy emphasis. He was also extremely sensitive to noise. Loud sounds would make him go into a state of high alert. My other co-workers whispered that he looked like a serial killer. Some said he was a time bomb that could explode and destroy everything at any moment. After a few weeks, I was assigned to work the night shift with Logan for 7 days. While our supervisor stayed in the office, Logan and I had to patrol the dark warehouses together. The air always smelled like rust. Those nights were haunting. I often heard Logan muttering to himself in a very angry voice. I think he did this only when he thought he was alone. I tried to start conversations to break the tension. From our short talks, I learned that Logan was badly injured at an old job, and the company had abandoned him. His only hobbies were intense exercise, restoring a 2006 Pontiac GTO, and reading old Russian philosophy books. I began to realize this man was carrying a lot of baggage from a dark past. But I felt like he was a threat to people from his history, not to coworkers like me. Everything reached a breaking point on the 4th night of our shift. Around 1 a.m., we were sitting in the guard shack by the main entrance. The silence was suddenly shattered when Logan stood up fast. He stared hard at the dark road ahead. "Something is coming up," he said. His voice was deep and threatening. I looked out, but I only saw pitch-black darkness. Logan was certain. "They turned off their lights so we won't see them. They are closing in." A second later, bright headlights from a van suddenly blinded us right in front of the shack. Before I could react, Logan lunged at me. He hit me like a pro football player and tackled me to the floor. At that exact moment, the entire guard shack exploded under a hail of machine gun fire. Logan laid on top of me. He used his giant body as a shield to protect me from flying glass and bullets that were shredding the thin walls. When the shooting paused, Logan, the only one on our team licensed to carry a gun, ran outside to fire back. I was trapped in a dark corner, shaking and holding a useless flashlight and pepper spray. From outside, a raspy, murderous voice shouted, "Where's Reed?" I didn't answer. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I'm asking again, where is Reed? I don't know anyone named Reed. It's just me and Logan in here, I yelled back. Logan? Fine. I'm counting to 3. Hand him over, or I'm coming in to kill you both. 1. I backed into the corner, gripping my pepper spray even though I knew it wouldn't help. 2. I heard other footsteps surrounding the shack. We were trapped. 3. Gunshots rang out again, but this time they were directed outside. There were screams, the sound of people running, and more chaotic gunfire coming from everywhere. A moment later, Logan appeared at the door. His gun was still hot, and his eyes looked wild. He barked an order for me to run to the main security office immediately. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely call the police. When the cops arrived, Logan was gone. After a deep background check, they found out all his ID papers were fake. His real name was Reed. He was a former prison gang member hiding out after a bloody war with his old crew. It has been almost 7 years, and I still work at that steel mill. I still don't know what he did to make those men hunt him down at a remote factory in Pennsylvania. But even though I know the truth about that time bomb, I will always be grateful. No matter who he was or how dark his past was, he saved my life that night. This is a supernatural mystery that I personally experienced. I used to work as a nursing assistant at a nursing home here in the Midwest. It was an old, 4-story red brick building. The hallways were very long and always smelled like a mix of bleach and pureed food. The rooms, they were designed for 2 people and were numbered starting from the elevator. There was an unwritten rule in the facility about room assignments. Residents who were in better health, mentally sharp, and needed less help were placed in the number 1 rooms at the end of each floor. These people were independent and almost never bothered the night shift staff unless there was a real emergency. For a night shift nurse, the number 1 rooms were like a guarantee of peace during a busy shift. That stayed true until one night in November. I was working at the nurses' station on the 2nd floor. At exactly 2 a.m., something very strange happened. Suddenly, every single call light for the number 1 rooms on all 4 floors turned on at the same time. The control panel lit up, and long, loud beeps filled the quiet hallway. It sounded like a terrifying alarm. I had worked there for 4 years, and I had never seen anything like it. The residents in the number 1 rooms rarely used their call lights. The chance of 4 people on 4 different floors pressing their buttons at the exact same second was almost 0. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and checked in with my coworkers on the other floors. We all ran toward the rooms at the end of the hallways. I pushed open the door to room 201. The room was dim, lit only by a faint yellow nightlight. Arthur, a retired engineer who was usually very calm, was sitting up in his bed. His thin hands were gripping the edge of his blanket, and he was shaking uncontrollably. I walked over to him and kept my voice low. "Arthur, it's me. What's going on? Are you feeling okay?" He didn't look at me. His cloudy eyes were locked onto the window. The curtain had been pulled to the side in a hurry. He pointed a trembling finger at the glass. His voice sounded like dry leaves rubbing together. "It is going down," he whispered. I started to walk toward the window, but Arthur grabbed my sleeve. He was so scared that his grip was actually painful. "Don't look directly out there." He just passed by. A man in dark clothes, head first. His hands were flat against the glass, like this brick wall was flat ground. The most terrifying part happened next. When I talked to my coworkers on the radio, they told me the exact same story. Their residents in the other number 1 rooms all said they saw a man crawling downward right outside their windows. The details were identical. It was as if they all saw the same thing at the same time. even though they were on different floors and had no way to talk to each other. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The logic of the situation was impossible. These residents lived on different floors and rarely interacted. None of them had cell phones to coordinate a prank. Besides, these were the most mentally stable people in the entire building. My unease turned into real fear when we asked the security guards to search the grounds. They used high-powered flashlights to check the bushes, the walls, and even the roof. They found absolutely nothing. There were no signs of climbing gear, no ropes, and no footprints. The exterior walls were smooth brick. There were no balconies or ledges for a person to hold on to. A police officer arrived later, but he just shook his head. There were no signs of a break-in or any disturbance from the outside. After that night, it never happened again. Everything went back to the slow, boring routine of the nursing home. However, the silence of the residents in those rooms was what haunted me the most. They never mentioned the man again, but their eyes always avoided the windows as soon as the sun went down. Many years have passed since then. I eventually quit that job and moved away, but sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night. I dream about the sound of all those call lights going off at once. Whether it was a ghost or something else, I know for sure that something not from this world visited us that night. Some mysteries will never have an answer, and some fears stay with you forever. I just hope that the man crawling on the wall that year finally reached the ground and disappeared, rather than hiding in some dark corner on the upper floors of that building. I still wonder what really happened that night. Why did they all see the same thing and then stay silent like it never happened? Even though I left that place years ago, I still feel like something is watching me from behind the window whenever it gets dark. I'm Alan, and I've been hauling freight across the Midwest for 10 years. I usually work the night shift because the pay is better and the roads are emptier. Driving in the dark through desolate areas, I've witnessed all kinds of strange things, from deer frozen in my headlights and hitchhikers to UFO sightings. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night, that winter in rural Ohio. That night, around 2 a.m., I was delivering a shipment of coffee and pastries to a Dunkin' Donuts located off a highway exit. Cold wind whistled through the truck's crevices, accompanied by dusting of snow. As I maneuvered my large truck around to the back of the building to park, the lot was empty. There was only the dim light from the drive-through service window. As my truck's headlights swept across the roadside curb ahead, I spotted her. A woman huddled in the snow, knees pressed to her chest, rocking slightly, her breath forming white clouds. She was wearing shorts and a tank top, clothing completely inadequate for the biting cold of a Midwest winter. Truck drivers learned to react quickly, and I knew full well that in the middle of the night in a secluded place, a solitary woman could mean trouble. I turned off the engine and slipped the cheap stun gun I bought online into my pocket. When I jumped out of the cab, she didn't look up until I was about 10 feet away. That's when I saw the dark stains on her shorts. Before I could say a word, she sprang to her feet. Her eyes were wild, like a cornered animal. Her voice was shrill, echoing in the dead of night. "My boyfriend stabbed me in the butt." After saying that, she began pacing back and forth, clapping her hands against her hips, and repeatedly shouting the sentence, "He stabbed me right in the butt. Can you believe it, my own boyfriend?" I paused for a moment and then responded, "Whoa, easy there, miss," I said, holding up my hands as if calming a frightened horse. "Are you okay? You don't look good. Do you need any help?" She continued to pace, mumbling something I couldn't make out. Then, she spoke louder. "Stabbed me in the butt. Yes, that's what he did right there." She turned around, pointing behind her, her voice growing harsher as she accused her boyfriend. She said he was crazy, and she had only cheated once a week and kept calling her boyfriend a jealous bastard for stabbing her. I immediately pulled out my phone and called 911. I reported to the operator that I was at the Dunkin' Donuts off Route 42 near Millersburg, and there was a woman who said her boyfriend stabbed her and needed immediate medical attention. Hearing me call the police, the woman stopped, tilting her head as if to listen. Her expression shifted to one of seriousness, and her voice dropped. "Are you calling the police? Mostly EMTs. Sit down, okay? You're hurt, and help is on the way." I explained while trying to shield the phone slightly, but her attitude became hostile. She introduced herself as Emily and explained that her boyfriend had stopped the car at the gas station after an argument. He took a knife from the glove compartment and bam, right in the cheek of the butt. I urged her to sit down because she was bleeding, but she refused. The operator asked me if she was under the influence of any substances. I asked, "Emily, have you taken any drugs or anything tonight?" Her eyes narrowed and her attitude changed completely. She stopped pacing and looked straight into my eyes. "This isn't my blood, and it might just be yours." She said I had made a big mistake by calling the police and threatened, "I'll stab you in the butt or worse." Without waiting, I quickly backed up, yanked open the cab door, jumped in, slammed the door shut, and locked it just as she pounded on the window. "Open up. You think you're safe in there?" I quickly reported to the operator that she was threatening me and that the blood was not hers. After one more pound on the door, Emily turned her back and ran straight across the parking lot into the adjacent field of tall grass. I started the engine, shining my headlights to follow her. She glanced back at me once, her face twisted in rage, and disappeared into the thick woods a few hundred yards away. The darkness quickly swallowed her. I sat in my truck, the stun gun gripped tightly in my hand, until I saw flashing blue lights in my mirror. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot. I confirmed I was the caller and told them the girl had run into the woods in that direction. An officer shone his flashlight onto the curb, where there were streaks of fresh blood. They made me wait in the truck while they searched. EMTs also arrived but had no one to treat. It wasn't until dawn that the sheriff's deputy returned with a serious expression. He said there was no sign of the girl. The woods were too dense, and she could be miles from the main road. "You believe me, right?" I asked, my voice hoarse from fatigue and tension. I pointed to the bloodstain clearly visible on the ground, emphasizing, "The blood is right there. You can check it yourself." He sighed, saying they had collected a blood sample and would check missing persons reports and domestic violence cases. I spent the next hour recounting everything. Finally, I asked, "Do you think she killed someone?" The officer shrugged. "It's possible. The blood will tell us more." The police let me leave after finishing the report. When I delivered the goods to the Dunkin' Donuts manager, he looked at me in astonishment, saying he had heard screaming and police sirens all night but didn't dare step outside. I just nodded, saying nothing more. Afterward, I climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and silently hit the road. But the image of Emily wouldn't leave me. Her huddled figure by the roadside, her wild eyes, her voice both pleading and threatening. It all kept replaying in my head. My name is Jimmy. I've been a night shift receptionist at the Riverside Motel for 3 years. It's a small motel on the highway, located in the middle of a small town called Millbrook, Ohio. In Millbrook, everyone knows each other. Rumors spread faster than the wind. Our town is so small and peaceful that a stranger might think time moves slower here. Wooden houses line the quiet streets. The Miller's family grocery store has been here since 1952. On Sunday mornings, after church, everyone gathers at Miller's Diner. They drink coffee and chat. The Riverside Motel, with its cozy rooms overlooking the river, mainly serves travelers. But sometimes it also becomes a place for private dates. Dr. Richard Morrison was one of the most respected people in our town. For many years, he ran a family clinic and took care of everyone's health. Richard was on the church board and donated to the local school. His wife, Susan, taught piano to children and ran a book club. They had 2 daughters and were the perfect model of a family. So I was quite surprised when I started seeing Richard show up at the motel one night. The first time was a few months ago. He was holding hands with a young woman. I was impressed by her standout blonde hair and her bright red dress. When I gave him the room key, Richard looked me straight in the eye. I understood what he was trying to tell me. I just nodded politely and pretended to be busy with paperwork. From then on, they became regulars. Every time he left, Richard would leave a $100 bill on the counter. I took the money with mixed feelings. A little bit of disappointment to see someone I once respected do something like that. But it wasn't my business. And honestly, I couldn't say no to that money. Everything changed when a new colleague named Marcus started working. Marcus was young, full of energy, and not from our town. "She's hot," Marcus whispered to me when he first saw Richard and the girl walk in. "My God, the old man with her must be really rich." I warned Marcus to watch his mouth and mind his own business. He just shrugged and gave a wry smile. Then one night, things started to get weird. Richard and the girl came, but they stayed longer than usual. Around 3 a.m., only Richard came out. He placed the key on the counter. "She'll be out later. I have to go." I didn't pay much attention and went back to my work. A moment later, Marcus suddenly pulled me into a hidden corner. He looked excited. "I have something to confess to you." I hid a small camera in the bathroom of that room. I was shocked. "Marcus, are you crazy?" "I know, but that girl is too hot. I swear this is just a one-time thing," Marcus said as he quickly worked on his phone. The screen showed a black and white image from the hidden camera. It started with the girl walking into the bathroom. I won't describe the next images. Both Marcus and I watched with great focus. A loud thud sounded. It was followed by a painful scream, then silence. The girl had slipped. We saw it clearly. A dark liquid started to flow from her head. It spread quickly. Dr. Richard ran in. He found the girl lying motionless on the bathroom floor. But instead of calling an ambulance, he stood still for a few minutes. He just stared, as if he was thinking about something. What happened next will haunt us for the rest of our lives. Richard took out medical tools. He sat down next to the girl. He gently cut her into small pieces. And then, he ate some of those pieces. There is no way to describe our feelings. With calmness, he slowly ate little by little. After a while, he continued to eat the internal organs. Marcus was frozen. I don't remember how many times I threw up. Finally, I crawled to the phone on the counter to call the police. 2 police officers arrived a few minutes later. After watching the video, they immediately blocked off the room. They also called for backup and a crime scene investigation team. They searched the room with luminol. They found traces of blood under the bathroom floor even though it had been thoroughly cleaned. What was even more surprising was that the remaining body parts were neatly arranged in the refrigerator. The head, with its wide-open eyes, and the golden hair that once impressed me, were now smeared with dried blood. Dr. Morrison was arrested the next morning at his clinic. At the police station, according to the detective doctor. Morrison confessed everything. They had met on an online dating site. On that fateful night, the girl slipped in the bathroom and suffered a head injury, but she didn't die right away. If she had gotten help in time, she could have lived. Dr. Morrison said he panicked. He didn't dare to call 911 because he was afraid his affair would be exposed. That would cause his career, family, and reputation to fall apart. In his desperation, he chose to hide the evidence by getting rid of the body himself in a way no one could have ever imagined, the detective explained to us. After the incident, the Riverside Motel was temporarily closed. Marcus and I were forced to testify in court. Dr. Richard, who was once respected by the whole town, had to go to trial. He was charged with hiding a death and desecrating a corpse. I've never stopped thinking about that blonde woman. Now that I look back, I'm not sure what makes me more uncomfortable, the images of what Richard did, or the fact that I was an accessory to a sick person. My name is Mia, and I'm 22 years old. I work as a cashier at a Shell gas station in Texas. The station is located in the middle of a huge field. There are a few cars during the day, but after midnight, it's like a ghost town. I usually work the day shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Jack works the afternoon shift, and Tom is in charge of the night shift. But that day, Tom called in sick and couldn't come to work. He asked me to cover for him. I agreed without knowing that it would be the most terrifying night of my life. Jack handed over the afternoon shift to me at 10 p.m. He reminded me to lock the storeroom door carefully because a few kids had been causing trouble in the back last week. I was a little nervous because it was my first time working the night shift. The first 2 hours passed normally, with a few trucks stopping for gas and soda. I sat behind the counter reading a magazine, listening to the soft country music from the radio, which made me feel less lonely. Around 2 a.m., when everything was completely quiet, I heard a scratching sound from the back. The sound was like claws scratching wood. I looked up and listened, guessing it was the raccoons looking for food again. Raccoons are very common in Texas and often rummage through trash cans for leftovers. Our gas station is located near the woods, so this happens often. Usually, I just make a loud noise, and they get scared and leave. I yelled to scare them away as usual, but the scratching only stopped for a few seconds and then started again. I was a little nervous because this had never happened before. I yelled louder, but the scratching not only didn't stop, it became more frantic. Then I heard a completely different sound, a loud banging, as if someone was punching the drywall repeatedly. No raccoon could make that sound. A scary thought crossed my mind. Someone was in the storeroom. I slowly stood up, my eyes fixed on the door leading to the storeroom in the back. My mind told me I should immediately lock the front door and call the police, but a part of me thought I might be overreacting. Maybe it was just a homeless person looking for shelter. Curiosity mixed with a little pride made me want to check the situation myself. I slowly walked to the storeroom door and pushed it open slightly, making a soft creaking sound. The scratching stopped completely. The air suddenly became tense. Although I hadn't seen anything inside yet, I already felt a sense of regret. Suddenly, the door burst open. In the dim light, I saw the figure of a man stumbling out. His appearance made me want to scream, but no sound could come out. His hair was messy and dirty, and his clothes were tattered, covered in black stains. But the scariest thing was his face. His skin had deep scratches. His eyes were wide, and his gaze was wild like a hungry animal. His mouth was wide open, revealing his yellowed teeth. He ran straight at me with insane speed. My survival instinct suddenly kicked in. I turned around and ran straight for the front door, running with all my might. Behind me, he was chasing me. I didn't dare to look back. Suddenly, a police car was parked right in front of the gas station door. 3 police officers were getting out of the car. I ran straight toward them. "Help me! There's a stranger in the storeroom!" I yelled. 2 officers quickly drew their guns and went inside the store. One officer stayed behind to reassure me. "Calm down, we'll take care of it." A driver passing by here called the police. He saw a person acting strangely behind the gas station. From the description, it seemed like he was trying to dig through the wall. Right then, the shouts of the 2 officers rang out. The man was now completely aware of the police's presence, but instead of surrendering, he decided to run. He ran toward the back door of the gas station, trying to escape into the woods behind. The 2 officers immediately chased after him. It didn't take long for them to catch up and restrain him. The intruder's final screams rang out and then sank into silence. "Suspect is in custody," one of the officers reported over his radio. After that terrifying incident, I took a few days off to get my head straight. The owner also called a repairman to patch the hole in the wall behind the storeroom. He also decided to install more security cameras and motion sensor lights around the area. Since that night, there have been no more break-ins at the gas station. I have not agreed to work any night shifts for any reason ever again. It was so lucky that someone noticed in time and called the police. I'm grateful, but also a little sad that I don't know who they are to thank them. There are moments in life when you realize that true evil doesn't have to be supernatural to be terrifying. I learned that on a late August night last year, while working the night shift at a Shell gas station in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm Carlos, 32 years old. I'm divorced and work the night shift to earn extra money to support my son. This job is usually quiet. Only a few long-haul truckers stop by and some drunk teenagers buy beer late at night. After my divorce, my life was already very subdued, and since I started working the night shift at this gas station, that quietness became even more profound. I even found myself reacting more slowly to every situation. That night, I was sitting behind the counter, looking at my phone. Outside, a light drizzle was falling, creating thin streaks of water on the window. The atmosphere was so quiet that I could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights above my head. Then the glass door burst open. A man walked in. He was big and had a disheveled and aggressive appearance. He walked straight to the counter and slammed a $50 bill down. The noise made me jump. He shouted just one word: "Gas!" I was startled and immediately stood up straight. He clenched his hands and stared at me for about 2 seconds. Without saying another word, he turned around and strode out. I put the money away, and a thought popped into my head: just another punk. Through the glass, I saw him go straight to pump number 4. His car was parked crookedly, not in the right spot. I stood up and walked to the window to watch. At first, I thought I would watch him struggle to open the gas cap or get the nozzle in, but what happened next made me freeze. He pulled the pump nozzle out, but instead of putting it in the gas tank, he opened the passenger side door. The lights from the gas station clearly illuminated his actions as he lifted the nozzle and began spraying gas directly into the car. I stood there, horrified. My mind was trying to process what my eyes were seeing. I rushed to the control panel and slammed the emergency shutoff button. A loud alarm blared, and gas pump number 4 immediately shut down. I took out my phone, and my hands were shaking as I dialed 911. I had just managed to give the dispatcher the address. The call was interrupted when I witnessed the next horrifying scene. A girl scrambled out of the passenger side door. Her body was drenched in gasoline, and she was in a state of extreme panic. She was screaming as she ran toward the highway, each step leaving gasoline trails on the ground. "I need police now. He's doused a girl in gasoline," I yelled into the phone. The next second, the man roared like a wild animal. I quickly threw my phone down and ran to the main door to watch. He threw the pump nozzle down and ran after the girl. Although he was big, he ran terrifyingly fast. In just a few seconds, he caught up to her. The scene in front of me will haunt me for the rest of my life. The man repeatedly kicked the girl brutally. The girl curled up on the ground, trying to shield herself with her small hands. Every kick made me shiver. I couldn't just stand there anymore. I was sure I was no match for that giant of a man. But I had to at least stall him until the police arrived. Otherwise, he would crush that girl. "Stop!" I ran out and yelled, but my voice was weak against his rage. He turned to look at me, his eyes red with hatred. "This bitch is cheating, she's playing me, and I'm gonna let her play with fire," he roared. My heart was pounding in my chest. The smell of gasoline was strong, and just a tiny spark would make this girl ignite instantly like a fireball. I talked to him, trying to reason with him. I tried to make my voice sound calm. "Hey man, calm down, we can talk about this." But he didn't even look at me. Just as he put his hand in his pocket, probably to find a lighter, police sirens blared. A few seconds later, 2 police officers jumped out of their patrol car, tasers ready in their hands. They yelled at the man to stop what he was doing. The man hesitated for a second. Then, like a cornered beast, he charged at the police. The sound of electricity buzzed. His body stiffened and he fell to the ground, convulsing for a few seconds before becoming still. I let out a gasp of relief, my entire body relaxing. Everything was okay now. An ambulance arrived a few minutes later. They quickly provided medical care to the girl. The police took my statement. They praised my courage before they left. But I didn't feel like a hero. The following nights, I worked in a state of extreme tension. Every time a customer walked in, I would watch every movement, every look. I talked to the store owner about installing more security cameras and keeping a baseball bat under the counter. After the incident, I realized that a person's rage can be truly terrifying if it's not stopped in time. Real monsters don't need fangs and claws. Sometimes it's just a normal person controlled by anger. I never thought a regular night shift would turn into a life or death escape. I'm Cassie, and I was 22 at the time, working part-time at a Dollar Tree store on East Main Street. I usually worked the evening shift because the pay was better, and I worked with Amanda. She was 2 years older than me with platinum blonde hair. Amanda was pretty private. She rarely talked about her family, only occasionally mentioning that she had to be independent from an early age. That particular shift, I remember it was around mid-August. I was doing inventory in the home goods section, while Amanda was tidying up the cash register. When the door chime rang, a man walked in. My immediate impression was how incredibly tall he was. He walked straight to the back of the store, turning left into the toy aisle. I assumed he was looking to buy something, so I didn't pay much more attention. A little later, I finished my task and headed towards the front counter. "Where did that customer go?" I asked. Amanda looked up, confused. "Which customer?" When I described the man in the black leather jacket, Amanda looked up from the register, bewildered. "I'm sorry. I didn't notice anyone come in." Just then, a rustling sound came from the aisles. We looked in that direction, then at each other, understanding that the customer was still inside. Browse. We finished our end-of-day tasks while waiting for him. Amanda started counting the cash in the register following the closing procedure, and I went to rearrange items that customers had moved. At 9 p.m., the store was supposed to close. We hadn't heard any more sounds from the aisles. Not sure if the customer was still inside, we decided to check. But strangely, he was nowhere to be found. "Maybe he left when we were busy," Amanda said. This was a bit odd, but not impossible. Perhaps he had slipped out quietly while we were focused on our work. We decided to complete the closing procedure. I continued turning off lights in the remaining sections while Amanda finished counting the money. The store was now only lit by emergency lights and the lights at the checkout counter. As I was in the back of the store, a strange noise came from the direction of the storage room. I stood about 10 yards from the storage room. "Amanda!" I called out, but there was no answer. I waited a few more seconds, but still silence. Thinking it was a mouse or something falling, I walked towards the main area of the store. When I reached the counter, Amanda wasn't there. The chair she had just been sitting in was still warm, and her purse and car keys were still in the drawer. I was a little confused, so I called out loudly, "Amanda, where are you?" My voice echoed in the quiet space. I walked around the store, slowly heading towards the back storage room. As I walked, I called out Amanda's name a few more times, but still no answer. Just then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, and a message from Amanda appeared on the screen. "Get out of the store now." I froze, incredibly confused. The phone vibrated again. A second message from Amanda. "He went into the back room and tried to attack me. I ran, but he's still in there." My body went numb. All the pieces started clicking into place in my head. That tall man hadn't left the store at all. He had been hiding somewhere, waiting for the right moment when the store was empty and dark. I slowly backed towards the main door, each step feeling like it was weighted with lead, my eyes still fixed on the dark hallway leading to the back. My heart pounded wildly in my chest. Just as I turned to bolt, a loud noise erupted from the back. I spun around, and a tall, dark figure lunged forward. In the flickering fluorescent light, what he held in his hand became clear. a large knife. There was something dark on the blade. I turned and sprinted towards the main door with all my strength. He lunged after me at terrifying speed. My reflection showed him swinging the knife like a weapon of death. In the very next second, the blade grazed my left arm, tearing my shirt and leaving a deep, long cut. A searing pain erupted and warm blood flowed down, but the pain only made me run faster. I shoved the door open and burst outside. Immediately, I turned back and locked the door. From inside, violent pounding on the door echoed, accompanied by threatening snarls like a caged beast. I pulled out my phone with a blood-soaked hand, dialing 911. Unexpectedly, before I could even make the call, the police arrived along with an ambulance, sirens blaring. My wound was quickly bandaged. I pointed at the store and recounted everything to the officers, my voice broken with shock. They surrounded the store, and it wasn't long before they let him out, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. Once he was in the police car, I urgently asked the officers about Amanda, my co-worker. She texted me a warning and then disappeared. Is she hurt? A middle-aged officer looked at me. We found her about 20 minutes ago. She had collapsed by the roadside, probably right after she made the call to us. She'd lost blood and has been taken to the hospital. A wave of relief washed over me. Amanda was safe, and thanks to her quick thinking, the police had arrived in time. The next day, once Amanda was conscious and stable, I visited her at the hospital. I asked Amanda about what happened in the storage room. She was silent for a long time, then sighed. It was my brother, Michael. Shock was clear on my face when I heard this. Her brother? The one she had never mentioned? Michael abused me since I was little, both physically and mentally. A few years ago, I reported everything to the police. Michael went to jail. Amanda turned her face to look out the hospital window, her voice slightly choked. He just got out of prison last week. No one in the family wants to help him financially or with a place to stay. He blames me, saying I ruined his life. Amanda closed her eyes, as if trying to push away horrifying images. I tried to keep my past a secret, start a new life, but he still found me. I hugged Amanda tightly, trying not to cry with her. 2 weeks later, Amanda returned to work. We still worked late shifts together, but now with at least one more coworker, and management had installed more security cameras and an alarm system. Michael was convicted of aggravated assault and using a dangerous weapon. Now, I've graduated and have a job in my field. Amanda and I are still good friends. I never thought that working at Popeyes would land me in a situation like that. My name is Sam. I'm 19, and I had just moved from Dallas down to Austin for college. This happened when I had only been working at Popeyes for a week. It was my first job, and I chose the evening shift because the pay was a little better. The store was located on East Cesar Chavez, a busy area. That night around 8 p.m., the store was pretty empty, just a couple of customers. Jake, the shift manager, was checking the fryer machine in the back. I was standing alone at the counter. A moment later, the door opened and a customer walked in. From the way she walked, I immediately knew something was off. Her steps were unsteady, and her hair was matted with sweat even though it wasn't hot outside. The smell of alcohol was strong as she approached the counter. I want the number 3 combo. She didn't look at the menu, but looked straight at me as soon as she stopped at the counter. I punched in the order on the register, my hands shaking slightly. The number 3 combo includes 3 pieces of chicken, fries, and a buttermilk biscuit. The total is $12.49. She handed me a $20 bill. Where's the soda? Ma'am, this combo does not include a drink. Would you like to add a soda? It's $2.99. Her face instantly changed. Her eyes went wide and her mouth twisted. No drink? I bought a combo. Ma'am, our number 3 combo does not include a soda. It's just chicken, fries, and a biscuit. I repeated slowly again, my voice trembling. I glanced toward the back, hoping Jake would show up, but he was still busy with the machinery. "Get the manager out here," she bellowed. I felt my heart rate speed up. This was the first time I had to deal with a situation like this. "Ma'am, I can help you. I apologize for the misunderstanding. I can give you a free cold drink." I tried to keep my voice calm. She stared at me for a few seconds and then suddenly laughed. A grating, mocking laugh. "Is that right?" She took a step back and started to dance. She moved her hips vulgarly, waved her arms up and down, and grinned directly at me. "Where's my soda? Where's my soda?" she sang while dancing. I froze. I knew she was drunk. The smell of alcohol was overpowering, but I still couldn't have anticipated this bizarre behavior. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor. A family in the corner got up. They quickly ushered their children out the door. "Please stop. If you don't want to buy anything, please leave the store," I said, my voice shaking a little. She stopped dancing and looked straight into my eyes for a few seconds. "No soda?" Her voice suddenly became very soft. Then she looked around the store. "No, ma'am," I replied, my heartbeat quickening a little more. She walked over to an advertising sign near the door, bent down, and picked it up. The sign was nearly 3 feet long and about an inch thick. "Hey, you can't touch that." I stepped out from behind the counter and exclaimed. She held the sign with both hands and turned to look at me with an expressionless face. "I want my soda." Then she slammed the sign hard into the large window next to the entrance door. "Stop it!" I yelled. The sound of breaking glass rang out like a gunshot. Shards of glass flew everywhere. That wasn't all. She picked up a plastic chair and threw it at the second window. The sound of breaking glass shook the entire store again. I stood there, unable to move. I watched her pick up another chair. This time, she wasn't looking at the windows anymore. She turned and looked at me with a hostile expression. "I still don't have my soda, do I?" she said, and started walking toward me. I backed up, my legs numb, unable to run. She got closer, starting to raise the plastic chair high. "I'm sorry, I'll give you a free soda," I shrieked. She was about to throw it at me. I put my hands up to cover my face, bracing myself. What is going on here? Jake's voice rang out from the back. He had just run out from the kitchen and saw the chaotic scene. She stopped, turning to look at Jake. In that moment, I retreated behind the counter. "Call the police!" Immediately, Jake yelled at me. She looked at Jake, then back at me. She threw the chair onto the floor and started to laugh. I tremblingly dialed 911, my eyes still fixed on her. The police arrived after about 10 minutes. By then, she had stopped. They found her sitting on the floor amid the broken glass, holding a large piece of glass in her hand. She did not resist when they handcuffed her. As the police led her away, she turned back, smiled at me, and said, "I still didn't get my soda." I felt so scared and helpless that I burst into tears. Later, I learned that her name was Emily. She was a frequent alcoholic and didn't have a stable job. Emily was sentenced to 6 months in jail and had to pay $3,000 for the damages. The store had to close for a few days for repairs. I didn't go back to working the night shift. I found another job at a library downtown.
I'm Alice, 26 years old, working as a switchboard operator for a hospital in Miami, Florida. My work is divided into 2 shifts, day shift and night shift. I often sign up to work the night shift because the night shift will have a higher pay. The work is not too difficult, but requires me to apply a lot of knowledge and skills at the same time. I will receive and handle calls to the hospital, provide information about services, support patients and customers, answer questions, and direct them to relevant departments. One evening I was on duty. It was about 11 p.m. I received a call. Hello, how may I help you?
I called to ask for guidance on how to help a girl be happy again.
It was the voice of a man. I guess he was in his 40s. I was quite surprised by this case, but realized this was not an emergency. Maybe this man is quite meticulous in taking care of his loved ones. I asked him gently. I am very willing, sir. May I ask what your name is?
Logan.
Yes, Mr. Logan. I wonder if the person you are interested in is your wife or your daughter.
She is not my wife or my daughter. We just met 2 hours ago. I already forgot her name.
His answer surprised me again, and I was silent for about 3 seconds. I asked him how she was doing. The man was silent for a moment, then spoke in a laughing voice.
She seemed very scared. She was crying. She seemed to be shaking.
Can I talk to her, sir? The man immediately refused when he heard my suggestion. He said he wanted to take care of that girl himself. I patiently continued the conversation with a bad feeling about this man. I hastily asked for the man's current address. He laughed.
Let me think for a moment. There are so many people here, so many. They are all lying quietly at my feet.
I remained silent at Logan's confusing answer. He suddenly laughed, said he was just joking, and read the address to me. Working very quickly on the computer, I realized it was an area near the cemetery, about 20 kilometers from the hospital. Suddenly, a girl's moans rang out from the other end of the line. I listened attentively. The moans seemed to come out while being gagged. Is something wrong, sir?
Oh, no. My girl is a bit resistant. I don't like this at all.
I heard a punch or something. I'm sure it was the sound of force being applied to the human body. I was very confused with all the inferences. That man spoke up.
She's better now, but she's looking at me with angry eyes.
I try to reassure myself and do my job properly. Mr. Logan, please let me speak to... Before I could finish my sentence, a painful sound rang out very clearly. Next was some sticky sound. My heart beat fast. I felt scared and creepy with my own speculations. On the other end of the line, a creepy laugh rang out.
She didn't look at me anymore, nor did she protest. She was sleeping on the floor.
I didn't answer anymore. My hands worked quickly on the computer. I quickly dispatched the ambulance and police car to the location the man named Logan had provided. After nearly 20 minutes, police cars and ambulances arrived at the location I identified. It is the guard building of a local cemetery. After calling loudly and no one responded, the police immediately rushed in. The scene inside the room made all the police and medical staff present there freeze. On the floor is the intact body of the female guard. All of her toes and fingers were severed. Blood splattered all over the walls, floors, tables, and chairs. She lost both eyes. The mouth was sewn tightly shut. The clothes have many rough cuts. All cameras in the cemetery were stolen. 2 surveillance computer screens were also smashed. The police also could not collect any further evidence to investigate the man named Logan. The following days, I was filled with regret. I should have called the police sooner when I noticed something unusual. I heard the entire process of that pervert murdering the female security guard without being able to save her. Police are still actively looking for information about Logan. I'm also not sure if the name he called himself is accurate or not. About a week later, I'm also on night shift. On duty that day, there were many accidents and emergencies. My mind was extremely stressed. I had just rested a bit. At around 12 o'clock, the phone rang again. I regained my composure and answered the phone with a professional attitude. The other end of the line was silent for a moment, then spoke.
Do you remember me?
I immediately fell into panic because I immediately recognized that voice as Logan's. Before I could react, he continued to haunt me. He accurately described my physical characteristics and the clothes I was wearing. Even scarier was the mole on the back of my neck, which he could also see. I stood up in fear and looked around the office. Logan's loud laughter rang out from the phone. The perverted and disgusting voice made my limbs weak.
Do you want to spend a memorable night with me?